Hello, and welcome back to Zenin Fanfics. Today we're starting part 6 of an exciting new series. What if Deku gained power to create quirk? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe for more content. The story we're featuring is written by the Ultimate One on fanfiction.net. You can find all the relevant links in the description, so be sure to check out the author's profile and say hello. Now let's dive into the story. Shinso stared down Izuku with a smirk on his face as Izuku looked at him seriously. "You must be feeling pretty good, huh?" Shinso taunted, his voice laced with amusement. "Making it this far, standing on this stage, all eyes on you. But you think you've got this in the bag." Izuku ripped off his left arm sleeve, confusing some of the audience members as he wrapped it around his mouth. Shinso stared at him, momentarily caught off guard. "What?" Izuku finished tying the fabric securely around his mouth, effectively preventing himself from speaking. His eyes, sharp with determination, locked onto Shinso's. The audience murmured in confusion, some wondering if this was some sort of strange battle tactic, while others quickly caught on. Shinso clicked his tongue, annoyed but not defeated. "So, you figured it out. Clever. But that won't be enough to win." Izuku only raised a brow before extending out Black Whip, wrapping it around him and dragging him across the concrete towards the line at blinding speed. The crowd erupted into gasps as Shinso skidded across the concrete floor, his boots scraping against the surface as he struggled to stop himself from being dragged toward the boundary line. It took only a couple of more seconds before Shinso was across the boundary line. The stadium fell into a stunned silence as the realization set in. Shinso had lost. The referee blew the whistle, confirming what was already clear. Shinso is out of bounds. Izuku Yagi advances to the next round. Midnight's voice boomed through the speakers. The crowd erupted, some cheering wildly for Izuku's victory, others murmuring in disbelief at how quickly the match had ended. Shinso lay sprawled on the ground outside the ring, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His fingers curled into fists, frustration boiling inside him. That was it. That fast. After everything. Izuku, still standing inside the ring, unwrapped the fabric from around his mouth and took a deep breath. He stepped forward, peering down at Shinso with an unreadable expression. "That was impressive," he said, offering a hand. "You almost had me for a second." Shinso looked at the hand, but didn't take it immediately. Instead, he let out a short, bitter chuckle. "Sure, man," he said, finally reaching up and grasping Izuku's hand, letting himself be pulled up. "Listen, Shinso. If your quirk does what I think it does, you will make a great hero. I do not want you to give up on your dream of being one. I expect to see you and fight alongside you in the future," said Izuku, still shaking his hand. Shinso stared at Izuku, his expression caught between disbelief and something else, something deeper. "A great hero." The words rang in his ears, cutting through the frustration of his loss. For years, people had dismissed his quirk as something villainous. It was always the same reaction: fear, distrust, even disgust. But here was Izuku Yagi, one of the strongest contenders in the entire festival, telling him that he had the potential to be a hero. Shinso clenched his jaw, his fingers still wrapped around Izuku's hand. He wanted to brush it off, to scoff, and tell him that empty words didn't change reality. But something in Izuku's eyes told him he wasn't just saying it to be nice. He meant it. Finally, Shinso sighed and pulled his hand away. "Tisish, don't think this means I'll start being all buddy-buddy with you," he muttered. "But I'll remember that." Izuku grinned, rubbing the back of his neck. "That's all I ask." He froze up and went into a numbed state, signifying that Shinso's quirk was in play. Shinso smirked as he undid his quirk. "That was the work of my quirk." Izuku blinked rapidly as he snapped out of the trance, realizing what had just happened. His body had gone rigid for those few seconds, completely unresponsive. Shinso smirked, crossing his arms. "You see, if you hadn't already won, that would have been the perfect opening. A second too late, though." Izuku let out a breath, rubbing his temples. "Yeah, your quirk is dangerous in a fight. If you had more time to train, I might not have had a chance." Shinso's smirk faltered just slightly, his fingers twitching. Yeah, well, not like that matters now. I lost. Izuku frowned, stepping closer. That doesn't mean anything. Everyone loses at some point, but what matters is how you use it to get stronger. Shinso scoffed. Easy for you to say. You got a flashy quirk. People don't look at you and assume you're some villain in the making. Izuku's eyes softened. Shinso, I don't think power makes someone a hero or a villain. It's what you do with it. And you're not giving up. Shinso looked at him, a little stunned, before shaking his head. You're annoyingly optimistic, you know that. Izuku chuckled. Yeah, I get that a lot. From the stands, the audience was still buzzing. Some were still cheering for Izuku's victory, while others murmured in shock at how short the fight had been. But a select few were watching Shinso with different eyes now. Aizawa, his sharp gaze focused on the two students, let out a quiet hum. That kid, he could see something in Shinso, something raw but promising. With the right training, he could go far. Shinso sighed. All right, Yagi, you better not lose in some dumb way, but I doubt that you will. I will beat you next time we face off. Izuku grinned. I'll be looking forward to it. As Shinso walked off the stage, the weight of the match still lingering in his mind, he clenched his fists. He may have lost, but something had shifted. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as far away from his dream as he thought. All right, let us move on to the next match, yelled out Present Mike as the two next contestants were making their way to the arena. Izuku got up to the 1A box to see his classmates waiting for him. Izuku barely had time to step into the 1A viewing box before he was met with an enthusiastic greeting. Deku, that was amazing. Uraraka beamed, giving him a thumbs up. Tisik whatever, said Bakugo, grumbling to himself. Izuku ignored him and walked over to sit by Jiro and Shoji. You did good, Yagi, replied Shoji. Izuku gave Shoji a grateful nod, settling into the seat next to him. Thanks, Shoji. I feel like I could have done more, though. Shinso's quirk is dangerous, and if I wasn't careful. You handled it well, Jiro interjected, offering him a small smile. You didn't let his mind control get to you, and that's a huge plus. Not everyone could do that. I didn't anyway. I was walking over to you to be on your team to the cavalry battle when he put me under. I didn't remember much of anything until someone bumped into me. Shoji let out a low hum, clearly understanding the severity of the situation. That's pretty terrifying. It's one thing to be caught in a fight with someone who can overpower you, but another entirely when they control your mind like that. Shinso's quirk is a real threat. Izuku absorbed Shoji's words as Present Mike started to announce the next two competitors. It was his turn to sit back and watch. On one side of the corner, we have a fiery girl from the class of 1B. She came here to eliminate the competition. Here is Enori Yagi of the hero course. Enori stepped on stage, flipping her hair out of the way to stare down her opponent on the other end. Her opponent is from class 1A. With agility, precision, and the power of his tape, he's looking to wrap up the competition. Give it up for Hana Siro. Siro stepped onto the stage with a confident grin, rolling his shoulders as he eyed Enori. Eliminate the competition, huh? He said, flexing his fingers as strips of tape extended from his elbows. Guess I'll have to make sure I'm not on that list. Enori popped her neck as she looked down at Siro. Whatever you say, man. Midnight put her hand into the air to begin the match as she looked at the two competitors. The tension in the arena heightened as Midnight raised her hand. Ready, set, go. She brought her hand down with a swift motion, signaling the start of the match. Siro wasted no time in launching tape from both of his elbows as he launched them at Enori. Enori flicked her wrist, using her telekinetic power to toss the tape to the side. Siro tried to control the tape, but couldn't no matter what his effort. In the blink of an eye, Enori closed the distance, sending a hard punch right at his chest, launching him towards the out-of-bounds line. Siro couldn't get a good grip as he flew past the line and landed with a hard thud. Siro groaned as he pushed himself up, rubbing his chest where Enori had landed the hit. Midnight glanced at him before raising her WHP. Siro is out of bounds. Enori Yagi wins the match. The crowd erupted in cheers and murmurs. Some were impressed by the sheer speed and power of Enori's attack, while others whispered among themselves about how quickly the fight had ended. Izuku leaned forward, watching as Enori turned away from Shiro without a second glance, walking back toward the waiting area. She didn't waste any time, Jiro commented. Didn't even let him get a second move in. She's efficient, Shoji added. A lot of people underestimate telekinesis, but she's got control and precision. That's a dangerous combination. Izuku hummed in agreement, watching as Enori exited the stage. She carried herself with confidence, her posture never faltering. Down in the arena, Shiro sighed, brushing some dust off his uniform. Man, that was over fast, he muttered, shaking his head. He glanced over at Enori, who didn't spare him another look. Guess I'll have to work on my speed. Jiro looked to Izuku, who was quiet for the most part. He had an analytical look on his face as he looked at his sister leaving the arena. He was subconsciously tapping his foot, showing he was either anxious or full of pent-up energy. His sister wasn't the best to him, and he knew that, but that didn't make Jiro worry about him any less. "You good dude?" asked Jiro as she placed a hand on his, making him jump slightly. Izuku blinked, shaking himself out of his thoughts. "Yeah, I'm fine," he said quickly, offering Jiro a small smile. She didn't look convinced. "You sure? You were kind of tense there for a second." Izuku sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's just a lot, but I'll be fine. Don't worry about it," he said, smiling slightly at her, secretly hoping she wouldn't push the subject. Jiro didn't look entirely convinced, but she decided to drop it, for now. "All right, but don't go bottling things up, okay?" Izuku nodded, appreciating her concern, even if he wasn't ready to unpack everything just yet. He turned his attention back to the arena as the next set of competitors were preparing for their match. "All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's keep this tournament rolling. Up next, we've got a battle of agility, acid, and grace. Introducing, from Class 1A, the ever-energetic, ever-unpredictable queen of the dance floor, Mina Ishido." Mina bounced onto the battlefield with a bright grin, striking a playful pose as she waved to the crowd. "Let's go," she cheered, already brimming with excitement. And her opponent, from Class 1B. She fights with unwavering ferocity and power. Here to wipe out the competition. Ibara Shiozaki, called out present Mike. Ibara frowned slightly at present Mick's words. "Excuse me, sir," she called out to him. Ibara frowned slightly at present Mick's words. "Excuse me, sir," she called out to him, her voice carrying a calm but firm presence. "I do not seek to wipe out anyone. My goal is simply to prove myself as a hero and walk the path the Lord has set for me." Present Mike blinked at the correction before letting out a sheepish chuckle. "All right, my bad, but let's see what divine strength you bring to the battlefield." Mina tilted her head, grinning as she stretched her arms. "Oh, fancy talk. Guess I better take this seriously, huh?" Ibara nodded solemnly, clasping her hands together as her vine-like hair began to subtly shift around her, like a living shield waiting to strike. "It would be wise." Midnight raised her hand, looking between the two competitors. The anticipation in the air thickened, the crowd falling into hushed murmurs. "Begin." Mina shot forward immediately, acid secreting from her feet as she used it to boost her momentum. She spun, launching a glob of acid directly at Ibara. Ibara's vines reacted instantly, growing outward to block the attack. The acid sizzled upon contact, eating away at the outermost layers, but the sheer mass of her vines absorbed most of the damage. Mina expected this. Instead of waiting, she pushed forward, twisting her body mid-air and sending another shot toward Ibara's flank. Mina barely had time to react as she felt herself being lifted off the ground, Ibara's vines coiling tightly around her limbs. "Put me down, damn it," she growled, struggling against the ever-tightening grip. "Of course," Ibara said calmly, barely breaking a sweat. With a flick of her wrist, she sent Mina hurtling toward the out-of-bounds line. Mina twisted in midair, her instincts kicking in as she released a concentrated burst of acid from her palms. The corrosive liquid struck the ground below her, melting a small crater into the arena floor. Using the momentum from her spin, she angled her body and kicked off the melting stone, propelling herself back toward Ibara before she could fully register the escape. The crowd gasped as Mina flipped through the air, landing on the ground with a skid. "Oh ho, now that was slick," Present Mike shouted, his voice booming through the stadium. Mina grinned, breathing heavily as she wiped some sweat from her brow. "Phew, thought I was done for a second." "You're done. I was just giving you a few more seconds," said Ibara, as vines tightened around Mina's legs once more. The crowd gasped as Mina struggled, trying to melt through the vines with her acid, but Ibara had anticipated that. The vines holding her were thicker, reinforced with layers that could withstand the corrosive effects just long enough. "It's over," Ibara stated solemnly. With one swift motion, she swung her arm, and the vines obeyed. Mina was lifted off the ground and hurled through the air. She flailed, desperately trying to grab onto something, anything, but there was nothing to save her. She sailed past the boundary line and landed with a loud thud outside the ring. Midnight immediately raised her WHB. Mina Ishido is out of bounds. Ibara Shiozaki wins the match. The stadium erupted in cheers and murmurs. Some applauded Ibara's precise and methodical approach, while others groaned, clearly hoping for a longer battle. Mina lay on her back for a moment, staring at the sky. Then, with a tired sigh, she sat up, rubbing the back of her head. "Man, I really thought I had her for a second." Ibara walked over, offering a polite bow. "You fought well. Your spirit and adaptability are admirable." Mina blinked before grinning up at her. "You're way too nice about kicking my butt." Ibara gave a small smile. "It was an honorable match." Mina chuckled as she took Ibara's offered hand and got to her feet. "Guess I'll have to work on my anti-vine strategies." Back in the stands, Class 1A was surprised to see the head of Monoma pop up from the other side, ready to mock Class 1A for losing. "Nice job, Class 1." Monoma's voice carried over the crowd, dripping with sarcasm. "You're really showing the world what top-tier heroes are made of. First, Mina, and now, who knows? Maybe you'll get lucky next time." "Monoma, shut up," came a voice from the Class 1A side. It was Kirishima, grinning through gritted teeth. "I swear, one of these days, save it, Beach." Monoma interrupted, a smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. "I'm just saying, you guys need to step it up. We've got talent in Class 1B who know how to win battles, not just put on a show for the crowd." He shot a smug glance at Ibara, who stood with a poised expression as she accepted the praise from her fellow students. "Ibara has been incredible," Izuku murmured under his breath, nodding in acknowledgement of her skill. Her control over the vines and that speed. Jiro, who had been silently watching, gave him a concerned look. "Are you sure you're all right? You're kind of zoning out again." Izuku blinked and immediately snapped out of his thoughts. "Yeah, sorry," he said, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "I'm fine, just analyzing things." Everyone then turned to see a raised hand over Monoma's head coming down to chop him on the neck. The blow was swift, and Monoma yelped, instantly flinching away from the unexpected strike. Itsuka peeked her head over, smiling. "Sorry guys, Monoma is a bit of a dunce." Monoma rubbed his neck, glaring at Itsuka with a mix of annoyance and disbelief. "You didn't have to hit me so hard," he grumbled, clearly not enjoying being on the receiving end of the playful strike. Itsuka smirked down at him, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Maybe you'll think twice before running that mouth of yours," she said, patting him on the head as if he were a child. "Honestly, though, you've been asking for it." Monoma muttered under his breath, but didn't argue further, clearly realizing that teasing Class 1, it wasn't worth his teammates' punishment. "All right, on to the fourth match, folks. From Class 1A, he brings the heat and will send chills down your spine. Shoto Todoroki. And his opponent, from Class 1B, a fighter known for her overwhelming stamina and speed, Ichiro Yagi." Ichiro and Shoto walked up, staring at each other with calculating eyes. Shoto from his right could hear his mother screaming from the audience. "Beat him up, Shoto. You can do this." Shoto's sweat dropped as he saw his dad, trying to calm her down, but he nodded in her direction. He looked at Ichiro, who was in a fighting position. "So, I finally get to fight Izuku's brother," said Shoto as he popped his shoulder. Ichiro smirked, his eyes narrowing slightly as he stretched his arms. "Not just Izuku's brother, but the one who's probably going to give me a real challenge. Cocky and arrogant. How the hell does Izuku deal with you?" asked Shoto curiously. Ichiro glared in annoyance. "Begin," called out Midnight, commencing the battle. Shoto immediately sent ice in Ichiro's direction. Ichiro activated Impact Drive and sidestepped the ice in the blink of an eye. He activated level 7 for a split second, sending a powerful wind-pressurized punch in his direction, breaking and shattering the ice. Ichiro smirked as he looked to Todoroki, holding himself up with the ice wall behind him. "You ain't winning this battle, dude," said Ichiro as he was hopping on his feet. "Let's see if you can handle this," Shoto muttered, focusing his attention on the battlefield. He summoned a large wall of ice, but instead of just using it defensively, he aimed to trap Ichiro inside with a series of thick barriers on all sides. Ichiro grinned, clearly relishing the challenge. "Nice try," he said with a confident tone, and then in an instant, his body exploded with speed. He activated his Impact Drive, focusing his energy in his legs as he launched himself forward with incredible force. The ground cracked beneath him as he dashed towards Shoto's ice wall. Shoto's eyes widened in surprise. "He's fast," he thought. The speed at which Ichiro moved was something Shoto hadn't anticipated. Just as the ice walls closed in on Ichiro, he threw a punch forward, generating a powerful shockwave that rippled through the air. The wave shattered the ice like glass, sending shards flying in every direction. "Impressive," Shoto admitted, though he didn't let his guard down. He immediately formed a ring of ice around Ichiro, trapping him in a confined space. But Ichiro wasn't fazed. He tilted his head, sizing up the situation. "You've got the power, but I've got the precision." With a swift movement, he activated his quirk once again. His fists slammed into the ground, sending another shockwave that broke through the ice and pushed Shoto back. The force of the impact was so powerful that Shoto barely managed to keep his footing. "This guy doesn't stop," Shoto thought, narrowing his eyes. Ichiro was relentless, each attack aimed at breaking through his ice defenses with impressive precision. The more Shoto tried to keep him trapped, the more Ichiro adapted, countering his every move. Shoto decided to try something risky and use both fire and ice at the same time. With a quick inhale, Shoto decided it was time to go all in. He focused his energy on both of his hands, one channeling the cold, the other the heat. The temperature around him dropped sharply as he created a thick ice storm at his feet, but in the same motion, his right hand erupted in a burst of flame. The two elements clashed around him, creating a steam fog that swirled through the arena. Ichiro watched Shoto's transformation with narrowed eyes, his smirk fading slightly. "What is he doing?" he thought, but before he could fully react, Shoto released a blast of fire toward Ichiro. The fire shot through the air like a wild beast, but Ichiro was quick to react. He sidestepped the attack with his typical speed, but just as he did, Shoto's ice shot from the ground beneath him. The floor froze under Ichiro's feet, trying to pin him in place. Ichiro, sensing the trap, immediately activated Impact Drive, causing a powerful shockwave to break the ice at his feet. But as he did, the fire that Shoto had sent toward him swirled into the ice storm and exploded, sending shards of ice and fire flying in all directions. "Damn it," Ichiro grunted as he barely managed to keep his footing amidst the chaos. The air was filled with steam and smoke, making it hard for him to see. His body was still vibrating from the shockwave, and he felt the heat from Shoto's flames stinging at his skin. Shoto didn't give him a chance to recover. With precise control, he alternated between fire and ice, creating a barrage of attacks that kept Ichiro on the defensive. Each time Ichiro broke through one layer of ice, another formed in its place, trapping him in a tight circle. The air was thick with the steam from Shoto's attacks, and the heat from his fire clashed with the freezing cold of the ice. "That's the trick," Shoto muttered under his breath, his eyes locking onto Ichiro. "Switching between fire and ice keeps him guessing." But despite Shoto's relentless offense, Ichiro's resolve never wavered. He was still determined to break free. Ichiro flexed his muscles, the impact from his quirk sending another shockwave that shattered the ice surrounding him. He gritted his teeth, knowing that if he didn't break out soon, he'd be overwhelmed. But he needed to find an opening. He couldn't keep relying on raw power alone. He had to outsmart Shoto. You know, unlike Izuku, you severely are underestimating me. That is one area where Izuku will always be better in, said Shoto, making Ichiro instantly pissed. Ichiro's jaw clenched, his teeth grinding together as Shoto's words echoed in his mind. Izuku will always be better. His fists tightened, his body tense with anger. A burning fury ignited inside him, and his emerald eyes locked onto Shoto with an intensity that sent a chill down the half-and-half hero's spine. Don't mention my brother's name, Ichiro growled, his voice dripping with venom. His aura flared, and at that moment, it was clear Shoto had pushed the wrong button. Before Shoto could react, Ichiro launched forward with explosive speed, his impact drive surging through his body. The ground beneath him cracked violently, sending debris flying as he closed the distance in an instant. His fist cocked back, a swirling pressure building around it, distorting the air itself. Shoto barely had time to brace before Ichiro's punch connected. The sheer force behind it was unlike anything Shoto had felt before. The moment Ichiro's fist struck Shoto's ice wall, it didn't just crack, it disintegrated. A deafening shockwave blasted through the arena, sending powerful gusts of wind that nearly knocked spectators out of their seats. Shoto was sent hurtling backward, his body skidding across the battlefield as he fought to regain control. His ice boots dug into the ground, barely stopping his momentum. His breath was ragged, and his arms trembled from the impact. What the hell was that? He thought, his mind racing. Ichiro didn't let up. He leaped into the air, twisting his body mid-flight, and came down with a devastating axe kick aimed straight at Shoto's head. Shoto barely managed to roll out of the way before the attack landed. The moment Ichiro's foot struck the ground, a massive crater formed beneath him, dust and debris erupting into the sky. Shoto's eyes widened. He's getting faster, stronger. You're not going to win this, Todoroki, Ichiro said, his tone lower, more dangerous than before. He rolled his shoulders, shaking off the lingering steam from Shoto's fire. You thought you could box me in with your ice. Keep me at bay with your fire. That's cute. He cracked his knuckles, his muscles flexing. But I'm done playing defense. Ichiro shot forward again, zigzagging unpredictably, making it nearly impossible for Shoto to get a read on his movements. Every time Shoto tried to send out ice, Ichiro was already gone, a blur of motion too fast to track. Shoto's mind raced. I need to stop his momentum. He suddenly slammed his hands together, releasing a massive, combined burst of fire and ice in all directions, creating a chaotic explosion of steam. The battlefield turned into a thick, blinding fog. For a moment, there was silence. Then, boom, the entire cloud of steam exploded outward as Ichiro tore through it with an all-out attack. His fist, now glowing with sheer force, collided with Shoto's gut. The impact was devastating. Shoto's eyes widened as all the air was forcibly expelled from his lungs. His vision blurred, his body lifting off the ground from the sheer force of the blow. The audience gasped as Shoto flew backward, crashing into the stadium wall with a thunderous crack. A stunned silence filled the arena. Ichiro exhaled slowly, shaking out his hand. I told you, he muttered, rolling his shoulders. Don't ever compare me to Izuku. Shoto groaned, trying to push himself up, but his body refused to move. He was spent. The sheer strength of Ichiro's attack had left him completely drained. Midnight steps forward, raising her hand. Shoto Todoroki is unable to continue, she called out. The winner of the match, Ichiro Yagi. The crowd erupted into cheers, but Ichiro didn't care. He turned on his heel, walking away from the arena, his expression unreadable. He had won, but his anger still burned. Izuku looked at his older brother with a bit of shock and nervousness. He was now tapping both feet at a fast pace, and he was still trying to figure out what the hell was wrong with himself. Jiro, standing beside him, noticed his unease. She leaned in slightly, her voice low. "Izuku, you okay?" "Without a doubt," said Izuku as he still tapped his foot on the ground. Jiro wasn't convinced. She'd spent enough time around Izuku to recognize when something was bothering him. His fingers twitched, his leg bounced, small tells of nervous energy that he usually suppressed when focused. But this time it wasn't excitement. It was something else. "Okay, I'm going to use the bathroom," said Izuku, getting up quicker than he normally would, and briskly walked away. Izuku walked down the hallway, his mind racing. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, and his breath came out in short, uneven bursts. His heart pounded like a drum in his chest. "What the hell is wrong with me?" he muttered under his breath. He leaned against the bathroom sink, gripping the edges tightly as he stared at his reflection in the mirror. His emerald eyes were wide, his pupils slightly dilated. His face was flushed, and his whole body felt like it was buzzing with unshakable energy. He was seeing images from when he was younger, when Enori and Ichiro would beat him up during his elementary and middle school years. Izuku closed his eyes for a moment, trying to steady his breath. The memories were flooding in, uninvited, and they hit him like a wave crashing against the shore. He had always been the smaller, weaker one, the one who had to deal with his older siblings' teasing and taunts. The feeling of being insignificant was coming back to him now. But that was a while ago. He had grown stronger, at least he thought he had. But now, watching Ichiro in the arena, it was like those old memories were resurrected. He could still remember the cruel sneers, the harsh words, and the moments when he felt completely powerless. Was that still affecting him? Was that why his heart was racing, his hands trembling, his stomach in knots? Why did it feel like his past was chasing him down when he'd fought so hard to leave it behind? "I'm not like that anymore," Izuku whispered to himself, his voice barely audible. "I'm not." He continued to see the way they laughed at him before he couldn't take it anymore, and he slapped himself hard in the face. The sharp slap echoed through the quiet bathroom, cutting through the turbulent thoughts swirling in Izuku's mind. His fingers lingered on his flushed cheek for a moment, the sting grounding him back to reality. It was a jarring reminder that he wasn't the same person he was back then. He wasn't the weak, helpless child who let his brothers push him around. He was a hero in training, someone with power, determination, and the resolve to overcome his past. "Get it together, Izuku," he muttered to himself, taking in a deep breath. His pulse was still racing, but the tightness in his chest started to loosen. "You're not the same. You're not helpless anymore." Izuku shook his head. "Focus." He looked over at the TV to see Reiko and Hiryu were about to be announced by Present Mike, and he sighed. "All right, I'll wait in here for a bit to cool off," he said, sitting on the counter. "From Class 1A, we have another telekinetic user. Please welcome Reiko Yanagi. From Class 1B, we have a boy with scales tougher than steel, Hiryu." Present Mick's voice echoed through the stadium as the next fight was announced. Rin smirked as he looked up to Reiko, who had a calm expression on her face. "Are both contestants ready?" asked Midnight, with them nodding in response. "Begin." Rin activated his scales and shot them at Reiko, with Rin activated his scales and shot them at Reiko with rapid precision, the hardened projectiles whizzing through the air like bullets. The crowd held their breath as they watched the first exchange unfold. Reiko, unfazed, simply raised her hand. The scales stopped midair, caught by an invisible force before they could reach her. With a flick of her fingers, she sent them flying back toward Rin at twice the speed. Rin's eyes widened, but he reacted quickly. He crossed his arms in front of him, his reinforced scales acting as a shield. The returned projectiles clattered harmlessly against his body, but Reiko was already making her next move. Without a word, she lifted her hand again, and the air around Rin shimmered. He suddenly felt his body becoming lighter. No, not just lighter. He was being lifted. "Tisich, telekinesis," he muttered under his breath, realizing what she was doing. Before he could counter, Reiko tightened her grip on the air around him and sent him hurtling sideways, slamming him into the arena floor with a loud thud. The crowd gasped. Rin gritted his teeth, quickly rolling to his feet. "Not bad," he admitted, shaking off the impact. "But I hope you've got more than that." Reiko didn't respond. She simply lifted her hand again, the same eerie calm in her expression. Rin knew he couldn't let her control the pace of the fight. He needed to close the distance. Pushing off the ground, he sprinted forward, weaving through the air to avoid any invisible attacks. The moment he got within range, he lashed out with a sharp kick aimed at Reiko's midsection. But just as his foot was about to connect, whoosh, his leg stopped mid-motion. It was as if an invisible force had wrapped around it, holding him in place. Reiko finally spoke, her voice quiet yet firm. Too predictable. With a mere gesture, she twisted her fingers, and Rin's entire body was wrenched sideways, sending him tumbling across the floor once again. The audience erupted into cheers, amazed at the control she had over the battle. Rin grunted, pushing himself back up. "DMN, you really don't waste movement, huh?" He smirked, wiping dust from his mouth. "All right then, let's see if you can stop this." Without hesitation, he activated his quirk at full power. His scales thickened, covering his body like armor, and his strength surged. Then, with a deep breath he shed, his scales shot outward in all directions like a deadly explosion of shrapnel. Reiko's eyes narrowed. She raised both hands, and immediately the storm of scales froze in the air. But the sheer number of them made it difficult to keep control. Rin didn't waste a second. He lunged forward with everything he had, bursting through the gap in her defenses. "This time she won't stop me." He swung his fist with all his might, aiming for her shoulder, but it never landed. The moment before impact, Rin suddenly felt himself floating. His feet left the ground, and he was weightless. His eyes widened as he realized she had lifted him. Then, with a downward move of her hand, Reiko slammed him into the floor with bone-rattling force. A collective oof came from the audience as a crater formed beneath Rin's body. Dust and debris filled the air. For a few seconds, everything was still. Then, Midnight stepped forward, assessing the situation. Rin groaned, tried to push himself up, but his arms gave out beneath him. "That's it," Midnight declared. "Hiryu Rin is unable to continue." The winner of this match, Reiko Yagi. The stadium erupted into cheers as Reiko lowered her hand, letting out a small breath. She gave a slight nod before turning away, her expression as unreadable as ever. Izuku nodded at his friend with a smile on his face. She handled that pretty well, all things considered. Granted, her quirk was nowhere near Enori's, but it was to the point where she could lift people up like the way she was doing. He was going to wait here for one more match, then he would be good to go. It was a few minutes before the TV showed Momo and Tokoyami's match, and he smirked as he looked to see his two friends on screen. This would be a good fight. He leaned against the wall, ready to see what would happen. "All right, we have two students from Class 1A. We have a man of mystery and darkness alongside a woman of elegance and creativity. Here is Momo Yaoyorozu and Fumikage Tokoyami." Momo took a deep breath as she stepped into the arena, her sharp eyes scanning the battlefield. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. Tokoyami was one of the strongest students in their class, and his quirk, Dark Shadow, was as unpredictable as it was powerful. Across from her, Tokoyami stood tall, his expression calm and unreadable. Dark Shadow loomed over his shoulder, twitching slightly, already prepared for battle. Midnight raised her hand. "Are both combatants ready?" Momo nodded, her mind already running through dozens of strategies. Tokoyami gave a small nod, his gaze locked onto her, already assessing her stance. "Begin. The fight is the same AS canon, and we know what happens." Izuku looked at the screen, worried about his friend. Momo had a downcast look on her face from the fight with Tokoyami. Maybe he would go to see her real quick. The thoughts of his past were temporarily gone as he went to go and find his friend. Izuku took a deep breath and pushed himself off the counter. His mind was still reeling from the confrontation with his past, but right now, Momo needed support. He left the bathroom and walked briskly through the halls of the stadium, heading toward the waiting area where the participants gathered after their matches. When he arrived, he spotted Momo sitting on one of the benches, her head slightly bowed, her hands resting on her knees. She wore a contemplative expression, her usual confidence dulled by the weight of defeat. Izuku hesitated for a moment, wondering what the right thing to say was. He knew that feeling all too well, the disappointment, the self-doubt, the endless replaying of what could have been done differently. He had been there before, and he still struggled with it. Gathering his resolve, he walked up to her. Momo. She lifted her head slightly, her sharp, intelligent eyes meeting his. Izuku, she greeted, her voice calm but lacking its usual strength. Izuku sat down beside her, giving her space but making sure she knew he was there. You fought well, he said sincerely. Momo let out a small sigh, shaking her head. Not well enough, she murmured. I should have anticipated his movements better. I should have come up with a countermeasure. But I hesitated. Izuku frowned. Tokoyami's dark shadow is a tough opponent, especially in an open battlefield. You did everything you could. She pursed her lips, but it wasn't enough. What's the point of having a strategic mind if I can't execute a plan properly when it matters? Izuku understood her frustration. He had struggled with similar doubts, constantly questioning whether he was capable enough, strong enough, worthy enough. But he had learned something valuable along the way, something he hoped Momo could recognize too. You're not defined by one fight, he said. Losing doesn't mean you're not good enough. It just means there's something to learn from it. Momo exhaled slowly, nodding. I know that, she admitted, but it doesn't make it any less frustrating. He smiled slightly. Yeah, I get that. Just promise me you won't doubt yourself. I know all too well what it is like to doubt myself. It's about confidence. Momo let out a soft sigh, her fingers curling slightly into her palms. Confidence, she echoed, as if testing the word on her tongue. That's what it always comes back to, doesn't it? Izuku nodded. Yeah, I mean, you have the skills, the intelligence, and the drive. But if you don't believe in yourself, then it's like fighting with one hand tied behind your back. Momo gave him a small, appreciative smile. I suppose you're right. It's just hard sometimes. When I see everyone else improving so much, when I see how easily they seem to succeed, I wonder if I'm really capable of keeping up. Izuku looked at her seriously. You don't just keep up, Momo. You set the bar for the rest of us. You're one of the smartest and most capable students in our class. We all know that. She blinked at him, surprised by the genuine certainty in his voice. Do you really think that? Izuku chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Of course. I mean, I admire how you always analyze everything so quickly, how you come up with strategies on the spot. Your ability to create things with your quirk is incredible, and I know for a fact that I wouldn't want to face you in a battle. Momo felt warmth rise to her cheeks at his words. She wasn't used to receiving direct praise, and coming from someone like Izuku, who she deeply respected, it meant even more. Momo smiled softly, a hint of gratitude in her expression as she looked at Izuku. Thank you, Izuku. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck, feeling a little embarrassed by the praise he'd given her, but still glad it seemed to have helped. I'm just telling the truth. You've got so much potential, Momo. She nodded thoughtfully, her gaze softening. I guess that's something I've been forgetting lately. Maybe I'm too HRD on myself. Izuku gave her a reassuring grin. We all are, but it's okay to give yourself a little slack every now and then. You've got this. There was a pause as Momo took in his words, her posture relaxing just a bit. The weight of the previous match still lingered, but it felt lighter now. She looked at Izuku, meeting his eyes with newfound understanding. I'll try to remember that. Izuku nodded, standing up from the bench. Well, I'm glad I could help, but we should probably head back. I'm sure Kyoko will be looking for me, and I don't want to keep her waiting. Momo stood as well, brushing off her uniform before giving Izuku a small, grateful smile. You're probably right. I'm sure she'll be giving you the stink eye if you're late. Izuku chuckled at the thought. I wouldn't doubt it. She has her ways of making sure I don't slack off. Momo's smile lingered for a moment longer before she nodded. Thanks again, Izuku. I really appreciate it. You've helped me more than you know. He smiled back, a little bashfully. No problem. As they re-entered the stadium, Jiro's voice pierced through the noise. Izuku, there you are. Izuku turned just in time to see her walking toward him, her arms crossed, and her usual mischievous grin plastered on her face. He could practically feel her eyes on him, ready to ask where he'd been and why he hadn't returned sooner. Hey, Kyoka, he said with a sheepish grin, waving at her as she approached. My bad. I feel better now, he said, giving a thumbs up. Jiro's eyes narrowed, her smirk never faltering. Feel better, huh? She repeated, crossing her arms tighter as she stopped in front of him. Yes, ma'am, he said with her punching his shoulder. Don't you ma'am me, said Jiro, slightly annoyed. How about we finish watching the fights? Izuku offered as he was rubbing the spot where she punched him. Jiro sighed, rolling her eyes but smirking nonetheless. Yeah, come on then, Izuku. Let's go see who else gets there but kicked. Momo chuckled softly at their banter, but gave Izuku one last appreciative glance before walking alongside them toward the stands. While the sting of defeat still lingered, she felt a little lighter now. Izuku's words stuck with her, and though she wasn't fully over her loss, she knew she could take something valuable from it. As they reached their seats, the next match was already being announced, the crowd buzzing with excitement. All right, everyone, here is a page break for you all, but I will say this. The next matches are going to be the canon matches. We all know what happens, and I doubt all of you would like me to type the same stuff that happened before. Kirishima moves on. Bakugo moves on. Simple as that. Izuku rubbed his hands over his face as he was freaking out a little bit. He still couldn't wrap his head around so that he would be fighting his sister in the next round. Jiro had caught on a bit as to why he ran off to the bathroom. Izuku's hands trembled slightly as he walked through the dimly lit corridor leading to the stadium entrance. His breaths came out uneven, his mind racing with a storm of emotions that he had buried for so long. Emotions he thought he had been under control. But now, with the looming reality of facing Enori in battle, everything was unraveling. He could hear President Mike starting to announce their names now. He looked up, taking a few deep breaths to keep himself composed. All right, this is going to be one of the most interesting fights thus far, folks. To start this out, we have a great matchup to start the second round. From Class 1, we have Lean Green Fighting Machine. Izuku Yagi. Izuku forced his legs to keep moving, despite the weight pressing down on his chest. The roar of the crowd barely registered in his ears, drowned out by the frantic beating of his heart. His mind kept looping the same thought repeatedly. I have to fight her. I have to fight Enori. At the end we have a girl who can pick up what you are putting down. From Class 1B, we have Enori Yagi. He yelled out as she made her way out of the other end. Izuku stood at his end of the area, his hands clenched at his sides as he watched his sister step forward. Enori Yagi's expression was unreadable, calm, composed, and yet there was a flicker of something deeper in her blue eyes. Determination. Hesitation. He wasn't sure. The crowd's cheers rang in his ears, but he couldn't focus on them. His heart pounded like a war drum, his thoughts racing faster than he could control. He knew he couldn't be in her range of telekinesis, otherwise he would be in trouble. Enori looked up to Izuku with a calm expression on her face. She knew one thing. This sucked. She was going to have to fight her brother, the one that dealt with the problems that her and Ichiro imposed on him nearly every day for all these years. She sighed as she got into a fighting stance. You better be ready, Izuku, she said as Izuku slowly nodded at her. Izuku got into his own stance, readying himself for the fight. A few from the stands caught on to the overwhelmed state with some curiosity. Mr. Aizawa leaned forward to see his student with a bit of concern on his face. What the hell is going on with him? He thought to himself. Midnight looked at the two competitors, sticking her hand into the air. Midnight's hand dropped, signaling the start of the match. Neither of them moved as they just stared each other down. A few in the audience knew the importance of this fight from the past that these two had. Izuku was breathing heavily now and trying to get the images of the past out of his head. He kept seeing himself in the alleyway that one day, where Enori, Ichiro, Bakugo beat him to a bloody pulp. Izuku's breath hitched as the memories surged forward, unbidden and relentless. The alleyway, the pain, the betrayal, his own siblings standing over him as he lay on the cold pavement, battered and broken. He shook his head, forcing himself to focus. This wasn't then. This was now. He clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms, grounding himself in the present. Enori was watching him carefully, her stance steady, her expression unreadable. He knew she was waiting for him to make the first move, to gauge his state of mind before striking. Izuku exhaled sharply. If he hesitated, he'd lose. And he refused to lose. He charged full cowling to 50% alongside activating Jolt. He cocked his fist back for a punch, preparing to send it Enori's way. Green electricity crackled down his right arm as he threw the punch forward, sending a green lightning bolt her direction alongside the added wind pressure from One for All. Enori's eyes narrowed at the lightning bolt coming at her. She had never been able to move energy-based attacks out of the way, so there was only one option left. She clasped her hands together as the ground around her moved to the front of her for protection. The force of the lightning bolt struck the makeshift barrier of stone, sending cracks rippling through it. Dust and debris exploded into the air, momentarily obscuring Enori from view. Izuku didn't let up. He knew giving her a moment to breathe would be a mistake. He dashed forward, the ground cracking beneath him as he moved at blind speed, his fist cocked back for another strike. Before he could get close, Enori clapped her hands together again, and the shattered remnants of her barrier exploded outward like a shotgun blast. Jagged chunks of rock and dust surged toward Izuku. His instincts kicked in, and he twisted his body mid-air, dodging most of the debris. A few pieces grazed his arm and shoulder, but he pushed through the pain, landing on his feet and immediately pivoting into another attack. Not bad, he muttered under his breath. The thing about Enori was her quirk was incredibly powerful without One for All already. Adding One for All into the mix made her boost everything about her. Strength, speed, reaction time, and control over her telekinetic abilities. Izuku knew this fight wouldn't be easy, not by a long shot. Izuku surged forward again, lightning crackling around his body. He zigzagged unpredictably, leaving afterimages in his wake. Enori narrowed her eyes, tracking his movement, but she didn't attack yet. She was waiting for the real threat, not the illusion of one. Then, in a flash, Izuku was right in front of her. His fist rocketed forward at high speed, but Enori had anticipated it. Her hands shot up, and the air between them seemed to ripple as she activated her telekinesis. Izuku felt an invisible force slam into his body, halting his momentum mid-strike. His eyes widened as he found himself momentarily suspended in the air. "Got you," Enori murmured. With a flick of her wrist, she sent him flying back at a dangerous speed. Time for Plan B, thought Izuku as he started to concentrate. Izuku gritted his teeth as he hurtled backward through the air, his mind racing to find a way out of her grip. The sheer force of her telekinesis was suffocating. It wrapped around him like an unbreakable chain, threatening to slam him into the arena wall at full force. But Izuku wasn't about to let that happen. Think, damn it. He urged himself. With an instant to react, he activated Jolt at full power, sending green electricity coursing through his body. His muscles tensed, and the air around him crackled violently. Enori's eyes widened slightly. She could feel the shift in his energy, the sudden resistance against her hold. That's it. Electricity. That was the key. If he couldn't overpower her telekinesis through brute force, he'd disrupt it instead. Using the energy surging through him, he began vibrating his muscles rapidly, forcing his body to tremble at an almost imperceptible speed. It was something he had theorized but never had a reason to try until now. If Enori's telekinesis relied on a steady grip, then disrupting his own physical state might make it impossible for her to maintain control. And it worked. Enori gasped as her invisible hold on him wavered. It was like trying to grasp water slipping through her fingers. Before she could adjust, Izuku twisted his body mid-air and shot himself downward, landing with a heavy boom that cracked the ground beneath him. The crowd roared in excitement at his incredible maneuver. Enori furrowed her brows. What? She clenched her fists, focusing her telekinesis again, trying to re-establish control. But as soon as she latched onto Izuku, he flared his electricity once more, making his body jitter unpredictably. She can't stabilize her grip on me anymore, Izuku realized, a small smirk forming. You figured something out, Enori muttered, her expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of surprise in her blue eyes. Izuku took a slow breath, steadying himself. For years, Enori, I have watched your strengths, but more importantly, your weaknesses. The biggest one being you can't manipulate energy, only something that is physical. You can't get a hold of me if I have myself covering in electricity. Inori's jaw clenched. She hated to admit it, but he was right. Her telekinesis worked by manipulating solid matter, anything she could physically grasp with her mind. But energy, that was beyond her control. And now, Izuku was using that against her. She quickly adjusted her stance, narrowing her eyes at him. That's clever, Izuku. You found a way to break free. Her fingers twitched as she analyzed his every move, looking for a weakness. But don't think you've won just because you figured that out. Izuku didn't respond. He had no intention of wasting time with words. His mind was set. He had to win this fight. With a sudden burst of speed, he lunged forward, green lightning arcing wildly around his body. He zigzagged unpredictably, making it difficult for Enori to predict his trajectory. Enori extended her hand, sending large chunks of the arena floor flying toward him, trying to box him in. But Izuku's movements were sharper, faster. He sidestepped the debris with precise footwork, each step cracking the ground beneath him. In an instant, he was right in front of her, his fist cocked back. Enori barely had time to react. She reinforced her body with telekinesis, bracing herself for impact. Izuku threw the punch, but it was a feint. At the last second, he diverted the momentum and brought his other hand up, aiming a powerful palm strike to her stomach. The force sent a shockwave through her body, staggering her backward. She gasped, struggling to regain her balance. But Izuku didn't let up. He twisted his body, spinning into a roundhouse kick aimed at her side. Enori barely managed to throw up a telekinetic shield to absorb the blow, but even then, the sheer force sent her skidding across the arena. The crowd erupted into cheers. Enori gritted her teeth. She had underestimated him. She had spent years seeing him as weak, as someone to push around. But this was completely different, Izuku, and it infuriated her. She exhaled sharply and slammed her palms together. The ground beneath them trembled violently. Izuku's eyes widened as he felt an invisible force built up around them. Fine, Enori muttered, her voice low. If I can't get a grip on you, I'll just change the battlefield. With a fierce motion, she pulled her hands apart, and suddenly, the entire arena shifted. Massive stone pillars erupted from the ground, twisting and turning like the limbs of some ancient beast. Dust and debris filled the air as the battlefield transformed into an unpredictable maze. Izuku clicked his tongue. She was forcing him into a confined space where his speed wouldn't be as effective. Smart. He darted between the rising stone formations, using his agility to navigate the shifting battlefield. But as soon as he found an opening, Enori struck. A massive slab of stone shot toward him from the side. He barely dodged it, flipping midair and landing on a nearby pillar. Before he could catch his breath, another boulder came flying. Izuku acted on instinct. He planted his hands on the surface of the pillar and launched himself forward, flipping over the incoming projectile. As he soared through the air, he charged his electricity to its peak. Then, with a powerful downward punch, he sent a shock wave through the stone beneath him. The energy surged outward, sending tremors through the battlefield. The unstable pillars cracked and began to collapse. Inori's eyes widened as she realized what he was doing. "You're destroying my cover," she muttered under her breath. Izuku didn't respond. He was already moving, dashing through the crumbling landscape with precision. His goal was simple: closed the distance before she could counter. Enori gritted her teeth and focused, using her telekinesis to stabilize the remaining structures. But in that moment of distraction, Izuku struck. With a sudden burst of speed, he appeared right in front of her, his fist glowing with raw power. This time, Enori had no time to defend. Izuku's punch connected squarely with her torso, sending her flying across the arena. She crashed into the ground, dust and debris scattering around her. The stadium went silent. The dust cleared and Enori was still standing, but she was standing where she wasn't supposed to. She had been knocked just outside the boundary line. The silence stretched for a moment as the realization dawned on everyone. Midnight, standing at the edge of the arena, quickly turned her gaze toward the white boundary marking the fighting zone. A single step beyond meant disqualification. Inori's feet were planted firmly in the ground, her stance slightly staggered from the force of Izuku's last attack. Her arms trembled as she tried to steady herself. Dust and debris settled around her, revealing the clear, undeniable truth: she had been knocked out of bounds. Midnight raised her hand. Ichiro Yagi has stepped outside the designated fighting area. Her voice rang through the stadium. The winner of this match, Izuku Yagi. For a second, everything remained still. Then, the stadium erupted into cheers, gasps, and exclamations of shock. Some students from Class 1A leaped from their seats in excitement, while others just sat in stunned silence. The weight of what had just happened sank in. Izuku won. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his body still buzzing with residual electricity. His fists were clenched, his muscles burned, and his vision swam slightly from exertion. He had given everything he had in those last few moments, pushing himself to outthink, outmaneuver, and overpower Enori. And it had worked. He took a shaky step forward, trying to process the reality of his victory. Enori smirked as she looked at her brother. Izuku looked at her, and she sent a nod his way as she turned around to go and get her battered body fixed up. Izuku still panted heavily on some members of their past returning, but he acknowledged the victory he had. His sister, the one that gave him so much SHD all these years, had finally been beaten by him. As the noise of the cheering crowd began to fade into the background, Izuku's thoughts turned inward. He couldn't help but replay the fight in his mind. How he had pushed himself to the limit, to think beyond his usual strategy, to use his quirk in ways he had never done before. His victory wasn't just a result of brute force. It was a culmination of everything he had learned, every failure, every step forward. He made his way down to the hallway to go back to his class when he looked up to see his teacher looking at him. Aizawa leaned against the wall and looked at his still panting student. "Good job, Izuku. You thought of something smart with some previous knowledge you had and put it to use," he said, pushing himself from the wall. "Thanks, Aizawa-sensei," Izuku said, his voice a bit strained from the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "Just curious, but why did you look like you were shitting bricks right before you fight with your sister?" Aizawa asked bluntly. Izuku flinched slightly as he knew why, but he didn't exactly what to tell him. "Well, it was nerves mostly," he said, leaving the question as vague as possible. Aizawa raised an eyebrow, his tired, unimpressed gaze never leaving Izuku. "Nerves, huh?" He crossed his arms. "If that's what you call nerves, then I'm wondering what you'd call when you're genuinely panicking. I could see it in your eyes before you fought her. You were hesitant." "Yeah, I know. I'm fine, though, so if it's fine, I would like to go back to the students section for my class now," he said, pointing down the hallway. Aizawa let out a long sigh, stepping aside as he uncrossed his arms. "Go ahead. Don't let me keep you. But remember, even if you're fine now, that hesitation, whether you want to call it nerves or something else, it'll come back. You'll need to deal with it sooner or later." His voice softened, more than usual, but just as serious. "I am sure it's nothing," he said, jogging down the hallway to go to his class. He pushed the thoughts aside as he approached the entrance to the student section. The noise of the crowd was still thunderous, but as he stepped inside, the chatter among his classmates immediately shifted to him. "Izuku, that was insane," Kaminari exclaimed, practically bouncing in his seat. I thought for sure you were done for when she sent that last attack at you. Kirishima clapped a hand on his shoulder. That was some real manly fighting out there. You didn't just go in swinging, you fought smart. That's how a real hero fights. Ida nodded approvingly, adjusting his glasses. Bakugo, who had been sitting nearby with his arms crossed, scoffed. Tisich, don't go acting all high and mighty just cause you finally managed to win against her. Isn't that what you do when you beat someone? Asked Izuku with a deadpan look. Bakugo's eye twitched at Izuku's response, and the others around them stifled chuckles. Kaminari nearly choked on his laughter, while Mina covered her mouth, barely holding back a snicker. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the second match in the second round, yelled Present Mike, getting cheers from the crowd. Izuku turned away from everyone as everyone else took a seat to get a nice view of the match to come. Izuku sat next to Jiro again, and she nodded at him. Nice match, dude. Thanks, miss, he said, adjusting himself in his seat. Jiro raised a brow. Did you just call me miss? She asked. If you didn't hear it, then you missed the opportunity, he said, chuckling to yourself. Jiro rolled her eyes, but there was an amused smirk tugging at her lips. You're such a dork, Izuku. Izuku chuckled, finally feeling his heart rate returned to normal after the intense match. His body still ached, and his muscles were protesting every movement, but the sense of accomplishment dulled the pain. This is a fight that will be between people from the same class, being Class 1B. We have Ibara Shiozaki, who will honorably beat up the competition. Then we have Ichiro Yagi, who will blast away everyone who gets in his way. Yelled out Present Mike. Ichiro and Ibara walked out from their ends and prepared themselves to fight each other. Ichiro looked over to Ibara. He hadn't talked to her much, even though it's been a few weeks, but he knew one thing from his own research. She was Izuku's friend. He hated that. They stood across from each other and stared at each other with serious expressions. Midnight looked to the two students and put her hand down to signal the match. The two looked at each other, waiting for either of them to make the first move. Ichiro scoffed as he put a hand through his hair. So, you're one of Deku's friends, he asked, knowing the answer. Ibara's gaze narrowed as she stared at Ichiro, her posture unwavering. Yes, I am. Is there a problem with that? She replied coolly, not the least bit intimidated by his tone. She had dealt with it far worse than this. Good, then you deserve this, he said, cocking his fist back, activating impact, level 7. He sent the punch in her direction, and a huge wind pressure attack launched her way. She had no time to react as she was flying backward out of bounds, but she didn't stop there. She continued to fly under. She hit the concrete barrier, leaving a crater where she impacted it at. When the dust cleared, Ibara was knocked out and wedged into the wall. Winner of the match is Ichiro Yagi, called Midnight, jogging over to Ibara. The crowd was silent for a moment, the tension in the air palpable as they processed the sheer force of Ichiro's attack. His punch had been a direct hit, and it had sent Ibara flying across the arena with overwhelming power. The impact with the concrete barrier had left a crater, and there was no sign of her moving. Izuku looked at his friend, who was wedged into the wall from his older brother. How could he do that? What was wrong with him? He already knew the answer to that. He looked like he was talking to her before the punch, and he wanted to know what he said. He started to breathe heavily as he gripped the arms of his seat. He was getting pissed. This was the first time in a long time that he was super F pissed. He could keep his temper in check, but this was too far. F the flashbacks that he was having from his siblings and Bakugo traumatizing him. He needed to beat Ichiro's head in. The sound of metal was heard as Izuku had bent the metal of the armrest, and he had realized what he had done. Izuku's breath came in sharp, ragged gasps as his fingers flexed against the mangled armrest. He hadn't realized the tension building up in his body until the metal bent beneath his grip, the soft screech of the seat's destruction pulling him back to the present. His heart pounded in his chest, every muscle screaming for action, but his mind fought to control the surge of anger threatening to boil over. He couldn't stand it. He couldn't stand seeing Ichiro, the brother of his own sister, attacked Ibara like that. The way he'd used his quirk so recklessly, with no regard for the safety of anyone involved, it made Izuku's BLD burn. This wasn't a fight. This wasn't about strategy or proving strength. It was about showing off. It was cruel, Izuku thought. Ichiro and Momo were wide-eyed as they looked to their friend being carried off by the stretchers. Ichiro was in butt, and they knew that, but that was a bit much. They went and walked out of the student section immediately to go and see her. Izuku's chest heaved with each breath, his entire body tense and coiled like a spring. The scene before him, the stretcher, the crater where Ibara had been slammed into the wall, was burned into his mind. It felt like a weight pressing down on his shoulders, and no matter how deep he breathed, it wouldn't ease the pressure. Shoji's massive hand settled on his shoulder, and despite the comforting gesture, Izuku could feel the weight of his concern. Shoji's expression was serious but calm, his usual quiet nature filled with the subtle understanding that only someone who had witnessed the weight of emotions could convey. "Hey," Shoji said softly, his voice steady. "You need to control it. You can't let it out here. I know you're pissed. I am too. But getting lost in that anger won't help Ibara or anyone." "I know," Izuku finally muttered, his voice tight. "I know I can't lose control. But it's hard, Shoji. This isn't just a fight. It's personal." Shoji nodded, understanding. "I get it. But listen, this is exactly the kind of thing we have to be careful of. Ichiro is using his quirk in a way that doesn't show respect for his opponents. That's dangerous, not just for others, but for him too." He paused, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "People like him think power is everything, but they don't realize that it's about responsibility. He's using his strength without any thought of the consequences, and eventually, it will catch up with him." Izuku sighed and folded inward. "I know, but when I face him in the next round, he will meet my fist, and he will get what's coming." Shoji gave a solemn nod as Izuku's words hung in the air. He knew his friend was struggling with his emotions, and while the anger was understandable, Shoji knew that rash decisions made in the heat of the moment could be disastrous. He gave Izuku's shoulder a reassuring squeeze, silently communicating that he was there for him. "It'll be all right, bro. Ibara is strong. She will be okay. I know she will. Just watch the next match before you get ready for Ichiro's," he said, letting go of him. Izuku nodded silently, the words not quite sinking in, but the quiet support from Shoji giving him a small sense of peace. He wanted to believe Ibara would be okay. He had to. She was strong. He knew that, they all did. But the image of her being slammed into the wall, unconscious, was seared into his mind. It felt like an assault on everything he stood for, and the frustration simmered just beneath the surface. Shoji, sensing his thoughts, didn't push him further. "I'm serious, though. You need to stay focused for the next round. If you let Ichiro get to you, he wins without even having to fight." Izuku nodded once more as he patted Shoji's hand, letting him know that he was okay now. "That's Mizo." He nodded at him and patted his shoulder one more time before moving his hand back. "No problem, bro." Izuku was phasing in and out as he was now in the waiting room for the next match. Reiko versus Tokoyami had been pretty quick as Reiko couldn't use her telekinesis on Dark Shadow, and the other rocks and debris didn't work on Tokoyami, and she was pushed out of the area. He was waiting as it was Kirishima versus Bakugo right now, and he had to wait until it was done. He heard a knock on the door to the room and looked up to see Jiro and Momo peek their heads through. "How is she?" he asked before either of them could say anything. Momo sighed, crossing her arms. "Recovery girl is treating her now. She's stable, but the damage Ichiro did was serious. She's got a concussion and some bruised ribs." Her jaw clenched slightly. "She'll be fine, but she won't be waking up anytime soon." Izuku exhaled sharply, closing his eyes for a moment. That was both a relief and another shot of frustration. At least she was alive. But this shouldn't have happened in the first place. Jiro leaned against the wall, her hands tucked into her jacket pockets. But didn't even look back. He just walked off like it was nothing. Because to him, it was, Izuku muttered, his fingers tightening into a fist. He didn't care about the damage. He only cared about making a point. "Don't worry. I got it," he said, standing up from his seat as he popped his shoulders. "You got what?" asked Jiro. "I got it." he said as he walked over to them. Izuku. Momo began carefully, stepping aside as he approached. I understand your frustration, but you can't let emotions drive you into a mistake. I know, he said, agreeing with her. Jiro's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied him. Do you? She challenged. Because you're looking a lot like you're about to go out there and tear him apart. Izuku popped his neck and started to fidget with his hands. Yeah, I do. This is just a fight between my brother, who tortured me when I was younger and went on major power trips. I will be fine, he said, reassuring them. Momo sighed, rubbing her face. Just be careful. Izuku nodded at them. I will, he said, hearing the speakers above. The winner of the second round and final fight is Katsuki Bakugo, said Present Mike. That's my cue, he said, looking at them as he opened the door to head to the arena. Good luck, Izuku, yelled out the two girls. Thank you, he said back to them. As Izuku stepped out of the waiting room and into the tunnel leading to the arena, his mind sharpened. Every footstep echoed around him, blending with the roaring of the crowd outside. His heartbeat was steady, but his body threw with tension. This wasn't just another match. This was a confrontation that had been years in the making. Ichiro was already waiting on the opposite end of the arena, rolling his shoulders lazily as if this were just another spar. His golden eyes flickered with amusement when he saw Izuku approach, his smirk widening. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. We have another sibling round, with it being Izuku Yagi and Ichiro Yagi. This is going to be good, yelled out Present Mike, hyping up the crowd. Izuku took a few breaths, ignoring some memories of his brother and staring at him. Ichiro scoffed as he looked over at Izuku. You ready to lose, Deku? Izuku said nothing as Ichiro continued. I wonder how Shiozaki is doing right now, he said, putting his finger to his lip. Izuku's fists clenched at Ichiro's words, but he forced himself to exhale slowly. He wasn't going to give his brother the satisfaction of a reaction. Not yet. Toshinori looked at his two sons in the arena and tapped his legs nervously. Enori versus Izuku wasn't nearly as intense. It was getting a bit nerve-wracking. He would also have a talk to Ichiro later about how he treated that Ibara girl. It wasn't okay to do that to someone who was another student and possible teammate or colleague in the future. Begin, called out Midnight. Ichiro lunged forward in the blink of an eye, but Izuku didn't move as he charged full cowling to 50%. I expected more from you, brother, but you are just as weak as you were when we were younger, Ichiro sneered, his fist crackling with energy. He launched a devastating punch, impact level 7 already charged and ready to release, straight into Izuku's face. The blow connected. A shock wave erupted from the impact, sending dust and debris flying outward. The ground beneath them cracked, and the crowd gasped in unison. But Izuku didn't move an inch. Ichiro's smirk faltered. His fist was still pressed against Izuku's face, but his younger brother hadn't even flinched. His green eyes, glowing slightly with the power of one for all, locked onto Ichiro's with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. What? Ichiro muttered, pulling his fist back slightly in disbelief. You could even hear the audience gasp from what had happened. Ichiro's smirk twisted into a scowl. Without hesitation, he reeled back and threw another punch, this time aiming for Izuku's jaw. Impact level 7 again. The sheer force is enough to send most fighters flying. The hit landed clean. Another shock wave burst outward, sending dust swirling into the air. The ground cracked further beneath them, but Izuku didn't move. The crowd's gasps continued. Even Present Mike faltered for a moment. Ichiro gritted his teeth and stepped back before launching a rapid series of strikes. His fists blurred as they smashed into Izuku's ribs, stomach, and chest, each blow carrying enough force to knock out most of their classmates instantly. Impact level 5, then 6, then another level 7. The entire arena trembled under the force of the attacks. And yet, Izuku remained rooted to the spot. His emerald eyes stayed locked onto Ichiro, unreadable. His expression barely changed. Ichiro's breath started to quicken. His hands throbbed from the force of his own attacks. He leapt back, shaking them out. What the hell? He muttered under his breath. Izuku slowly tilted his head. That's it, he asked, his voice calm, almost disappointed. "Shut up," he yelled, cocking his fist back once more. "F it. He is pissing me off. I don't give a damn about my arm anymore. I will hit him with level 7 at full force even if it hurts me," he thought as he channeled everything he had. Ichiro roared in frustration, his green eyes burning with fury. He clenched his fists, his knuckles cracking under the strain as he poured every ounce of his strength into his next attack. Energy crackled around his arm like a violent storm as he lunged forward, swinging with everything he had. The sheer force of his punch sent out shockwaves before it even connected, the air splitting with a deafening boom. The ground beneath his feet shattered, debris flying outward from the sheer pressure of his strike. The punch landed squarely against Izuku's cheek. The stadium went silent for a fraction of a second before the explosion of impact rippled outward. A shock wave erupted, shaking the entire arena. Cracks webbed across the stone floor like spider silk. Dust and debris shot into the air, blinding everyone in the immediate vicinity. And yet, when the dust settled, Izuku still hadn't moved. His head hadn't even turned from the impact. His emerald eyes bore into Ichiro's, unwavering, filled with nothing but quiet resolve. Ichiro stumbled back, eyes wide with disbelief, his breathing heavy. His right arm twitched violently, pain shooting up to his shoulder as it was still connected to his face. He gritted his teeth, tried to ignore the numbness settling in. Ichiro's mind was racing. His punch had been his strongest, yet powered by every ounce of his strength, his anger, his frustration, everything he had. The sheer might of it should have sent Izuku flying, crumpling to the ground in defeat. But there Izuku stood, unflinching, unaffected by the overwhelming force that had shaken the entire arena. It was as if his body had turned into stone, immovable and resolute. "Beings no one can hear us, I will say this," said Izuku calmly, grabbing his fist from his face. "Years. You have tormented me for years. Every day DMN day, since we had our test to see what our quirks at 4 years old, have been a DMN struggle because of you and Enori treating me like I'm so DMN weak and pathetic," he said calmly. Ichiro tried to grab his hand away from him, but there was no breaking his grip. "I would love to beat the hell out of you for all you had done to me. Every last thing. But I'm a nice person. Even after everything you, Enori, Bakugo, and all those bullies have done to me, I still don't want to. Though the difference between you and Enori is that she's making an effort to say that she F up a sister, and I can respect that. I am closer to forgiving her than you. But I think one big punch is good enough for you and nothing more," Izuku said, glaring at him with daggers. Ichiro continued to pull his arm, but nothing happened. "Let go of me, Deku," he said pleadingly. Izuku got into his face, making Ichiro flinch back. "You know why you get one big punch? Even after all you have done to me?" he asked Ichiro, who shook his head no. "Because you aren't worth it," he said, punching him at a speed no one saw but a few of the top heroes in the audience. Ichiro barely had time to process the words before the world around him exploded in pain. He was sent flying backward, and he didn't have to react to himself slamming into the wall. Ichiro's body slammed against the stone wall with a deafening crash, the force of the impact cracking the arena's walls and sending a shockwave through the stands. The entire stadium fell into stunned silence as the dust slowly began to settle. For a moment, it felt as though time itself had frozen. The audience, which had been filled with anticipation, now found themselves breathless, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Ichiro lay crumpled against the wall, his body twitching from the overwhelming force of the punch. His eyes were wide, his chest heaving with shallow breaths. His limbs felt like they were made of lead, and he couldn't quite register what had just happened. He hadn't expected this. No one had. "The winner of the match is Izuku Yagi," called out Midnight, making the audience go wild. Ichiro forced himself out of the wall with a grunt as he landed on the ground with a thud. He stood up, struggling, and glared at his brother. Izuku was shocked that he wasn't knocked out, but then again, he dropped his 50% full cowling to about 30%, so he wouldn't hurt him too much. He didn't like his brother, but he wasn't going to pulverize him as much as he'd like to. "I am going to beat you. I'm not done, d a minute," yelled out Ichiro as he charged at Izuku, but was stopped as Midnight stepped forward, her voice firm and commanding. "That's enough, Ichiro," she called out, her tone carrying the weight of authority. "You've had your chance. The fight is over." Ichiro's face twisted with rage, his breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. His hands were trembling from the exertion, but the fire in his eyes still burned bright. He looked like a cornered animal, desperate and unwilling to accept defeat. "I'm not finished," he shouted again, his fists clenching and unclenching as he struggled to contain his fury. "I said you were done," she said, cutting her clothing as she activated her quirk, Somnambulist. The fragrance hit Ichiro's nose that made him slowly fall asleep. "Sleep, Ichiro." Midnight's voice was soft but firm, the authority behind her words undeniable. The tranquilizing effect of her quirk settled deeper into his senses, and his struggles became more and more futile. His body finally gave in, and he collapsed to the ground with a dull thud, unconscious. The arena was eerily quiet now, the tension of the moment still hanging in the air. The crowd, initially in shock from Izuku's devastating punch, now found themselves stunned at the sudden turn of events. The fact that Ichiro, once so full of rage, was now out cold, left a silence so profound it almost felt unnatural. Izuku turned to walk away from his now asleep brother with a serious look on his face. That was for Ibara, but he made his way into the hallway to walk to the next room. There was one match between now and the championship round. It would be nice to fight Tokoyami and not Bakugo, but you never know. Wait, he just realized. He was in the championship round. OSHD. He never thought he would make it this far. Not that he didn't have confidence in himself, but it was just crazy. It was a shame that he couldn't go back to the students section to see his friends because of how close the match was, and he needed to be ready for anything. He opened the door to the waiting room and plopped himself down in one of the chairs. He really had fought Enori and Ichiro and won. It made him feel good. After all these years, he wasn't weak anymore. He wouldn't be weak anymore. He wouldn't be treated like he was useless. He finally had showed his strength to his family, but to DMN near most of Japan. He smiled at his accomplishment. Soon it would be his turn to show Bakugo how much he had changed. It was like he was going down the list. It took about 7 minutes before he heard President Mick's voice on the speakers. Katsuki Bakugo is the winner of the second match in the semifinals. Now we will take a few minutes break before we have our final match. The door to the waiting room opened, and Enori walked in, her eyes scanning the room. As soon as she saw Izuku, her expression softened. "Izuku," she said, her voice almost hesitant, "you did it. I saw the fight. You were amazing." Izuku smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. He didn't want to deal with Enori right now. Not after what had happened. Not after everything she had done. The way she had treated him, the way she had sided with Ichiro for years, it still stung. She had always been his sister, but she had also been a part of the problem. Part of the reason he had felt like he couldn't live up to expectations. "I know, Enori," he said, his voice flat, "but I'm not really in the mood for praise right now." Enori's brow furrowed, and she took a step closer, a soft sigh escaping her lips. "Izuku, please. I know we've had differences." "But I know," Izuku interrupted, standing up suddenly. "I don't want to hear it. Not now, not after everything. Maybe when this is all over, we can talk. But not now." "Yeah, I know. See you later, and good luck," she said quietly as she left the room. Izuku put his hands to his face and sighed. "Damn it. Why can't anything be easy?" Izuku muttered under his breath, clenching his fists in frustration. He wanted to be rid of all of this, to just focus on the championship and the future, but there were too many lingering thoughts. Too many unfinished chapters from his past that he wasn't sure how to close. "All right, I should go to the arena. Time to fight Bakugo," he said, getting up and walking to the door. He opened the door and started to walk down the hall and took a few deep breaths. Time for the final round. They are both from Class 1A, two of the best in the class, two fierce competitors. Give it up for the two finalists of the championship round. Izuku Yagi and Katsuki Bakugo yelled present Mike, getting the loudest cheers from the crowd all day. Izuku took a deep breath as he stepped into the center of the arena, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew this fight was going to be different. This was the moment he had been working toward for years, the moment he could show everyone, especially Bakugo, that he wasn't the same weak kid he had been. He could feel the weight of the audience's expectations on him, the weight of his own self-doubt trying to creep in. But he pushed it all aside. It was just him and Bakugo now. Present Mick's voice boomed over the loudspeakers. Both finalists are ready. The final match of the sports festival begins now. Bakugo looked over at Izuku and smirked. Don't hold back on me. I don't need your pity. Izuku looked over at Bakugo and shook his head. I'll fight you how I want. Tisich, Nimin smartass, he said, getting into his stance once more and looked over to Midnight, who had her hand in the air. May the final round begin, she said, stepping back. Bakugo charged forward with his explosions propelling him. Eat this, Deku, he said as a barrage of explosions was sent his way. Izuku activated Jolt and dodged them with ease. Bakugo growled in frustration, his eyes burning with determination. He didn't give Izuku a chance to breathe, launching another round of explosions from his palms. This time, Izuku could feel the force building, and he knew that if he didn't act fast, he wouldn't be able to keep dodging forever. Bakugo growled at him as he sent a chain of explosions at him. God damn it, you're holding back against me. Fight me with the power you fought against Ichiro with. Izuku clenched his fists, steadying himself. Fine then, he said, charging full cowling to 50% and Jolt. He threw a punch into Bakugo's direction, sending a giant wind pressure attack laced with electricity. Bakugo didn't have enough time to move away and was caught in the attack. The blast of wind and electricity surged through the arena, the shockwave rattling the stands. The crowd gasped as Bakugo was caught off guard by the full force of Izuku's strike, the powerful gust sending him stumbling backward. His body was jolted by the electric current that crackled through the air, but he gritted his teeth and forced himself to stand tall, rage and determination burning in his eyes. Holy SHD, I got lucky that time, said Bakugo as he charged forward once more. Izuku charged up some electricity into his arms and shot them at Bakugo with surprising speed. Dual Thunderbolt, said Izuku as green lightning bolts shot from his arms, crackling through the air like twin spears of electricity. The blasts were fast, sharp, and precise, aimed directly at Bakugo. He barely had time to react as the bolts hit him, sending him skidding across the arena floor. Bakugo let out a strangled roar, his body seizing up from the electricity's current. His muscles twitched uncontrollably, but he gritted his teeth, focusing all his energy into breaking free from the shock. With an explosion that rattled the ground beneath them, Bakugo pushed himself up, his body enveloped in a burst of fiery power. You son of a bitch. ETH, was all he said when Izuku sent a kick to his chest, sending him upward into the air. Izuku jumped into the air ahead of Bakugo, as his momentum was too much to stop himself. Izuku cocked his leg back as he prepared to strike him. I'm not the same kid you made fun of, Bakugo. You need to learn that. You and Ichiro do, he said, hitting him with a powerful axe kick. The force of Izuku's axe kick connected with Bakugo's chest, sending him flying upward through the air like a ragdoll. The arena fell into stunned silence for a moment as everyone watched, eyes wide in disbelief at the sheer power Izuku had displayed. Bakugo struggled to regain his bearings, but the momentum was too much. His body twisted through the air uncontrollably as he sailed past Izuku, his back slamming into the ground several meters away, skidding to a halt just outside the arena's boundary line. A collective gasp swept through the crowd as they watched Bakugo's body come to a stop just beyond the limits of the ring, outside the marked boundary. The announcer's voice echoed through the stadium, almost as stunned as the rest of the spectators. It looks like Bakugo is out of bounds. The match is over. The winner of the tournament is Izuku Yagi, exclaimed Midnight. Izuku stood at the center of the arena, breathing heavily, his heart pounding in his chest. His body was screaming from the strain, but there was a sense of accomplishment and finality in his chest. He had done it. He had won the final round against Bakugo. The crowd's cheers erupted, deafening, but Izuku couldn't hear most of it. His focus was on Bakugo, who was slowly pushing himself up from the ground, clearly struggling, but with a look of intense rage and disbelief on his face. The sheer shock of being knocked out of bounds, like that, seemed to stun him momentarily. Izuku didn't take his eyes off Bakugo, even as the cheers grew louder around him. The fight wasn't over for Bakugo yet. He knew Bakugo would rise to the challenge again. This wasn't the end of their rivalry. It was just another step in their long, complicated history. Bakugo muttered, gritting his teeth as he steadied himself, his hands still sparking with the last remnants of his explosive power. His voice, strained and furious, cut through the air. "You're gonna regret that, you BSDRD." Izuku sighed as he looked over to him. "Even after everything you've done to me, Katsuki, you aren't a villain. You were just too proud for your own good." Bakugo's eyes flared with fury, but there was something else in his gaze, something that wasn't anger. It was a glimmer of confusion, of frustration, as if he didn't know what to do with Izuku's words. "What the hell are you talking about, Deku?" Bakugo shouted, his voice hoarse and cracking. His hands were still sparking with explosive energy, but the intensity had dimmed just a little. He was still angry, but there was a vulnerability in his stance that he hadn't been there before. "You think you figure me out? You think you can just stop?" Izuku said, putting a hand up. "You know I am right. I am telling you now, whenever you fight against yourself as well as the opponent you're facing. Just think about it. You have the chance to be a great hero. Even after what you did to me when we were kids, I don't even know why I'm helping you at all." Izuku turned around to walk, his footsteps heavy with exhaustion but steady. He didn't look back at Bakugo, knowing the words had already been said. Bakugo just stayed there quietly thinking to himself. Bakugo stood still in the center of the arena, the deafening noise of the crowd fading into the background as his mind raced. His hands were still sparking with the remnants of his explosive power, but the familiar surge of anger that usually propelled him forward felt distant now. Soon every one of the first years was waiting patiently for the medals to be shown after the tournament. Midnight stood and presented herself in front of everyone and smirked. "Now it is time for the awards to be paced out," she said, gesturing behind herself to a platform that emerged from the ground. It showed the first, second, and third place winners. "The person presenting these awards are someone very special." "Ha ha," said All Might standing on the top of the stadium. All Might landed with a powerful thud, causing the ground to shake slightly as his iconic smile lit up the entire stadium. The crowd erupted into cheers, thrilled by his presence. "Now then, start with third place and make your way up," said Midnight, presenting him with 2 third-place medals. All Might grabbed the medals and walked over to Tokoyami and Ichiro. "Young Tokoyami, great job," he said, placing the medal around his head and hugging him. "Though you must learn to not use techniques that rely solely on your quirk. Continue the great work, and you will make a fine hero," he said, letting go of the hug. "Yes, sir," he said calmly as he looked at the third-place medal. All Might turned to Ichiro, who stood with a grin of pride on his face. "Young Ichiro, you showed incredible resilience in your battles," he said, placing the third-place medal around Ichiro's neck. "You've got heart, and that's what every great hero needs. Keep refining your skills, and you'll go far," he said, hugging him. Ichiro nodded, his chest puffing up slightly with pride, hugging back the #1 hero. He then was shocked when he whispered in his ear, "We need to talk after all of this." Ichiro nodded, and All Might stepped back and grabbed the second-place medal. All Might's gaze shifted to the second-place medal, his smile not wavering as he called Bakugo forward. The crowd's cheer quieted slightly, but there was still an underlying current of anticipation. Bakugo stood stiffly, still brimming with tension, his eyes narrowed, as if daring anyone to challenge him. He took a few slow steps forward, his fists clenched at his sides, still simmering with frustration. "Young Bakugo," All Might said, his voice filled with a rare, serious tone. You've got a fire inside you that burns brighter than any other. But fire needs control, or it will consume you. You're a force to be reckoned with. But to be a true hero, you need to remember that power is nothing without DSPLN. Bakugo didn't do anything. He just simply nodded at the #1 hero who had hugged him. It was rare when he was quiet, but he was deep in thought about something. After a long pause, Bakugo finally glanced up, his gaze still intense, but tempered with something more. He looked directly at All Might, who was still smiling, proud and patient. Bakugo gritted his teeth, still holding on to that spark of defiance, but his words were quieter than usual. "I'll remember that," he muttered, his voice hoarse, almost reluctant. All Might gave him a firm, approving nod. "I know you will, young Bakugo. You've got the potential to be a great hero. Don't let your pride blind you to that." The final award ceremony continued as All Might turned toward Izuku, the bright smile returning to his face. "And now," he said, his voice brimming with pride and joy, "the winner of the tournament," he said, placing the first-place medal around his neck. All Might hugged Izuku, and he froze for a moment. Izuku didn't know what to do, but he reluctantly patted his shoulder. "You did good, my boy. Great job on everything. Proud of you. Your mother is proud of you, too," he said, letting go of the hug. "Thanks, Dad," he said quietly with All Might nodding. All turned around to show them to the world. "There you have it, everyone. Our winners," he said, getting cheers from everyone. The applause that erupted from the crowd was deafening, the sound of thousands of students and spectators roaring with excitement. Izuku's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of his victory began to sink in. The cheers weren't just for him. He realized that now. They were for everyone who had put in the effort, who had struggled, who had faced their challenges and fears. The competition had been fierce, but the bonds that had been forged through the trials were what truly mattered. And Izuku knew that this was just the beginning. But remember, anyone could have won today. They're all here because of the hard work and effort they all put in. Continue to improve and continue to excel. You are all the future, next generation of heroes. And I think our future is bright. All Might's voice rang out across the stadium, his words filled with genuine pride. His hand was raised high, holding the microphone, and the crowd hung on his every word. Izuku felt the weight of his words settle in his heart as he stood next to him, his own medal still warm around his neck. It was the culmination of everything he had worked for, but it wasn't just about him. It was about all of them, every single person who had fought, struggled, and pushed themselves in the tournament. Each of them had earned their place here, and Izuku could feel the weight of that truth. "Don't ever forget," All Might continued, his voice booming with the energy of his conviction. "It's not just about the power you have. It's about how you use it, how you grow from your challenges, and how you inspire others with your actions. Each one of you is a hero in your own right, and your journey is only just beginning." The applause that followed was thunderous, almost overwhelming in its intensity. Izuku made his way down the stairs from the podium, still processing the overwhelming cheers that echoed around the stadium. His heart was racing, but a sense of calm settled over him as he stepped back toward his class. His classmates were waiting for him with excited smiles and proud expressions, eager to congratulate him on his hard-earned victory. "Great job, Izuku bro," Kirishima shouted, his voice filled with enthusiasm as he stepped forward. His usual grin was even wider than normal. "You were amazing out there. You really brought it in the final." Izuku's cheeks flushed, and he scratched the back of his head, trying to humble himself. "Thanks, Kirishima. I just did my best." Siro was next, slapping him on the back with a friendly grin. "You were awesome, man. You really showed us all what you're made of. You got this hero thing down." "Totally," Mina added with a cheerful cheer, jumping up to give him a high five. "You've got the heart of a real hero, Izuku. I've never seen someone give so much in a match. You were so intense, but you kept it together. That's what makes you a winner." "Yeah." Todoroki's voice came from behind, his usual calm, tone a bit warmer. He nodded toward Izuku with a rare smile. "You kept your focus the whole time. That's not something everyone can do under that kind of pressure. I'm impressed." Izuku smiled, his heart swelling with pride, but his humility kicked in. Thanks, Todoroki. I couldn't have done it without all of you guys pushing me to get better. Mineta, who had been quiet up until now, cleared his throat and sheepishly rubbed the back of his head. Yeah, man. You totally crushed it. Seriously, I thought you were going to faint from the excitement after that last round, but you kept it together. That's some serious willpower. Izuku chuckled softly, a bit embarrassed by Mineta's comment, but grateful for his words. Thanks, everyone. I still can't believe I actually won. Don't downplay it, Kaminari said with a wide grin. You earned it. And honestly, I didn't think you had in you to pull off that last move, but you surprised me, man. You really do have the spirit of a true hero. Thank you, everyone, he said, bowing to them. I just am happy, he said, smiling a megawatt smile. He received a few more hugs, fist bumps, and high-fived a little bit after. He soaked in as much as he could, and he couldn't be happier than in this moment. This was the first time in a long time that he was super excited and happy with what he had done. He couldn't wait for what came next on his list of being a pro hero. A few days after the sports festival ended, many recovered from injuries and the battles they had amongst their peers. Izuku was currently jogging to class, as he was about 5 minutes before the bell. Izuku was thinking about his friend's Ida as he looked to the news to see that he was attacked and sent to the hospital with career-ending injuries. It was by the hero killer. He hadn't seen him at all the past few days, so he knew it was bad. He then heard a voice out from behind him. Yagi, we better hurry before we're late, Ida said, pulling his raincoat over himself a bit more, and he and Ida picked up the pace. Izuku turned, startled but relieved to see Ida beside him, jogging with a determined look despite the grim news surrounding him. The rain drizzled lightly, dampening their uniforms as the two moved quickly toward the entrance of UA High. Ida, you're here, Izuku said, glancing at his friend. Are you okay? I'm fine, Ida replied curtly, pushing his glasses up. Let us hurry. Izuku frowned slightly. He could tell Ida was suppressing his emotions, but he didn't want to push too hard. They had arrived, just in time, slipping through the classroom door as the bell rang. Not long after Mr. Aizawa walked into the room, he was no longer in his cast anymore. Ribbit! Wow, Mr. Aizawa, you are fully healed now, said Azui with curiosity in her tone. Yes, I am. I am ready to go for whatever happens, but that isn't the point right now. Today we have a class on hero informatics, he said, creating suspense in the room. Everyone felt like a 100 PND weight was just set on their chest as he looked at them blankly. You all need code names. Hero names, in other words, he said as the class started to cheer. Aizawa's eyes turned red to silence them in what they did. This is also about the pro hero draft picks that I told you about a bit ago. Normally, this is for the second and third years, but when first years are offered, it allows for heroes and other pros to see if you are worth the time and effort and if they will invest more time and money into you, he said, hitting a button with a screen lighting up behind him. Here are the totals for the offers given to those who receive them, he said, showing them. Izuku Yagi, 4,887 Katsuki Bakugo, 2,556 Shoto Todoroki, 982 Fumikage Tokoyami, 360 Momo Yaoyorozu, 111 Reiko Yanagi, 89 Injiro Kurishima, 66 Achiko Uraraka, 20 Hanashiro, 18 Mina Ashido, 3 Izuku sat there, mouth agape, as he dropped his pencil at the amount of offers he got. Are you sure that is right, Aizawa-sensei? Aizawa sighed, rubbing his temples. Yes, Yagi, these numbers are correct. You got the highest number of offers in your class, so don't act surprised. The entire class erupted into chatter. Dude, 4,887 offers. That's insane. Kaminari exclaimed, leaning forward in shock. You really impressed a lot of pros, Yaoyorozu added with a smile. Not that I'm surprised. Izuku swallowed hard, still trying to wrap his head around the sheer number. He knew he had performed well during the sports festival, but this was beyond what he had expected. He cast a glance at Todoroki and Bakugo. Todoroki looked indifferent, as usual, but Bakugo, the blonde, was practically radiating anger. His eye twitched, his grip on his desk tightening. TCH. I don't care about numbers, Bakugo muttered, though it was obvious he did. Aizawa, ignoring the chatter, continued. Regardless of your offers, every one of you will be interning with a pro hero. For those without offers, we've arranged internships through other means. The students who didn't receive offers nodded, relieved they wouldn't be left out. Midnight stepped forward, flipping her WHB playfully. But before you go running off to your internships, we need to finalize something very important. Your hero names. Excitement filled the room once again. This is the name you'll carry into the future, so make sure it's something that represents you, Midnight explained. It should be something that speaks to your heart, your ambitions, and your ideals as a hero. The students murmured among themselves as Midnight gestured toward the whiteboard. Now, let's get started. Kirishima eagerly stepped forward first, scribbling something down before turning the board around. Red Riot, he declared proudly. Ah, after Crimson Riot, Midnight asked with an approving nod. Kirishima grinned. Yeah, he's my idol, and I want to embody his spirit. The class clapped for him, and one by one, the students continued presenting their hero names. So you chose Frappi. Yaoyorozu went with Kriati. Tokoyami, in his usual brooding manner, picked Tsukuyami. And, of course, Bakugo, King Explosion Murder, he shouted confidently, turning his board around. Silence. Rejected. Midnight deadpanned, crossing her arms. Bakugo scowled. Then how about Lord Explosion Murder? No. Bakugo grumbled under his breath as the class snickered at his struggle. As the process continued, Izuku found himself lost in thought. The sheer number of offers he received was overwhelming, but what weighed on his mind more was Ida. He hadn't spoken much since class started, and even now, as students excitedly wrote their hero names, Ida sat there, silent and unmoving. Izuku watched as his friend finally stood up and walked to the board. He took a deep breath before writing, Ingenium. The room fell quiet for a moment. Midnight's expression softened. Ingenium, a noble name. Ida nodded stiffly and returned to his seat without saying another word. Izuku clenched his fists, feeling an unease settle in his chest. Then Shoto walked up from behind Izuku and showed him his name. How about this? He asked, wanting his opinion. He looked at the name with a nod of approval. That's a good name, Todoroki. He walked to the board, showing it to everyone. Flame Freeze. Great name and straight to the point, said Midnight. Kaminari was still thinking about his when Toru whispered to him. How about Thunder Pudding? She said, giggling with Mina joining in. Would you guys be quiet about that? He said, pouting as he hid himself in his arms. Soon it was Izuku's turn as he went up to the board. He inhaled slowly as he turned around to show the class. Many were surprised at his choice of hero name, especially Shoji, Momo, Jiro, and Tokoyami. Tokoyami even had his mouth open for shock. Bakugo, who would usually glare but had his eyes wide as he stared at the name, he and Izuku's siblings mocked him with. The board read Deku. Interesting name. What does it mean? Asked Midnight. Izuku smiled as he told everyone. The name Deku means hope. It means that no matter how many times I fall or fail, I'll get back up. It's a reminder that there's always a way forward. I don't want to give up, no matter how hard things get. It also reminds me to keep pushing for happiness, not just for myself, but for the people around me. I want to help people, be the kind of hero who never gives up, who fights through anything to protect others. Izuku's hands were shaking slightly, but his voice was growing stronger, more confident as he continued. I want to be the symbol of hope, the kind of hero who doesn't give up on anyone, no matter what. If I can prove that I can turn something meant to bring me down into something that motivates me to keep going, then I'll be able to inspire others to do the same. There was a brief silence after he finished speaking. Midnight smiled, her eyes reflecting understanding. Deku, huh? A name born from perseverance. It's perfect for you, Izuku. Soon after, everyone had given their hero names, and Aizawa had woken up to talk to everyone once more. All right, class. Let's focus on the agency aspect of things now, he said, grabbing some papers. Everyone who has offers from heroes will have a different list than people who didn't receive offers. For those who didn't receive any, you will have about 40 agencies to choose from, he said, handing out papers. I want you all to think about this carefully. This is a big decision for you all, as this will last 1 week. You should also be careful what type of agency you would like to choose, as there are different ones, he said, gesturing for Midnight to continue. If you want to be someone like Space Hero 13, then you should work for someone who works on rescuing people rather than fighting, and vice versa. Though you will work with people in all these fields at one point. Just remember that, she said, striking a pose. Aizawa set the last stack of papers on Izuku's desk and sighed, grabbing his sleeping bag. You all have 2 days to decide, so you better choose wisely, he said, starting to walk out the door with Midnight. The classroom fell into a murmur as everyone began looking over the papers Aizawa had handed out. Izuku started on the list of agencies, each with a brief description of the work they specialized in. His mind was spinning, trying to decide where he would fit best. With so many options and so little time, the pressure was on. Lunch break, so did you guys choose yours yet? Asked Mina, leaning on her desk. I'm doing it with MT Lady, said Mineta, giving her a thumbs up. Leave it to the pervert to go and learn under a pretty heroine, said Azui as she walked by him. Mineta gave an offended look and pouted. What? She's strong, and I can learn a lot from her. You do realize MT Lady isn't just about being strong, right? Suyu replied with a playful smirk. Mineta groaned, clearly embarrassed, but he wasn't the only one trying to decide. Izuku sat at his desk, eyes scanning the papers in front of him. The list of agencies seemed endless, and while he'd heard of some of them, many were new to him. Each agency had its own reputation, goals, and heroes that specialized in particular areas. Who are you thinking of? Momo asked, leaning over to Izuku's desk. I'm looking for well-rounded heroes right now. Ones that do a bit of everything, he said, crossing out names that weren't the best choice for him. What about you? He asked curiously. Kimui Woods, he said, making a few of the others pleasantly surprised. Kimui Woods, Izuku repeated, surprised but impressed. That's a good choice. He's a great hero, strong, reliable, and someone who'll teach you a lot about strategy and teamwork. Momo nodded, her expression thoughtful. Yeah, he's the kind of hero who knows how to stay calm under pressure, and his wood-based quirk has a lot of versatility. It'll be a good learning experience, for sure. Yeah, I'm going to narrow this down until I get 8 of them on my list, then go from there, he said, looking surprised when he saw Edgeshot was on his list. You've got this, Izuku, Momo encouraged. Just think about who will help you grow the most as a hero, not just who's famous or well-known. Izuku smiled, grateful for her support. Thanks, Momo. Ida had put down one name on his list and decided to get up and go for the rest of the day. They were doing nothing else for today, only choosing people they wanted. Soon the sun started to set, and Izuku had 10 hero agencies that he narrowed down to that would be the most well-rounded for him. Not in any specific order, he had Endeavor's agency, Edgeshot's agency, Best Genus agency, Gang Orca's agency, Ryukyu's agency, Hawk's agency, Fat Gum's agency, and Sir Naitai's agency. It was a solid list, and he could finally go and give the paper to Aizawa. He got up from his desk, and Uraraka, who had been waiting for him to go. You ready, Izuku? She asked happily. Yeah, I need to stop by Aizawa-sensei's office really quick. Tell him that I narrowed the list, and I will choose by tomorrow, he said, opening the classroom door to see All Might sliding in. I am here in an awkward position, he yelled out as Izuku jumped slightly from his dad. May I speak to you really quick, young Izuku? He asked, shaking slightly. Oh, sure, Izuku said as Achiko waved him off. I'll go back to the dorms, she said as she waved at him. Izuku looked at his dad, who was still shaking. Follow me, he said as he walked to the teacher's lounge. He opened the door to see Enori and Ichiro were sitting on the couch, as a man in a yellow and white suit who looked like an elderly man. He had a walking stick, and he looked Izuku up and down as he went to sit on the couch with his siblings. Toshinori undid his buff form and stood across from the other end of the room. Well, I haven't seen you all since you were babies, said the old man as he walked closer. My name is Gran Torino. You likely haven't heard of that name at all, he said, taking a seat across from them. Kids, this man here is the man that trained me and is one of my masters, he said, shaking horribly, making the 3 of them confused. You good, Dad? asked Ichiro as he leaned forward. Yep, just give me a second, he said, slapping his legs, and they stopped shaking. The three siblings turned their heads back to Gran Torino, who was glaring at Enori and Ichiro. I came here for one person, he said. That person is the youngest of you three. Izuku, he said, looking him up and down again. Why me, sir? He asked curiously. From what Toshinori told me of what he did, you, and what your siblings did you, I am disappointed and pissed, he said, gripping his cane. Ichiro sat up and looked at Gran Torino and glared. Now hold on, old man, he said before Gran Torino glared at him. Shut up, brat. Respect your elders, he said before turning back to the three of them. Now I have been watching you three the past few weeks, and I can say that I am interested, to say the least. I can see that Enori is legitimately trying to undo her wrongs. I can respect that. You realize that you messed up with treating your brother like garbage and want to fix that. Do you see it too, Izuku? He asked, looking at him. Izuku nodded slowly. Yes, sir, I do. Gran Torino nodded. Good. Ichiro, on the other hand, that is a different story. You do not look like you want to fix it all. That is what is disappointing, but we will talk about that later. I am here to say, Izuku, he said, getting his attention. I heard you had DM in near 5,000 offers from hero agencies and pro heroes for internships. Is that the list in your hand? He asked. Ichiro looked shocked and jealous at his brother. He only had 1349 offers. Yes, sir, it is, Izuku replied, swallowing hard. He could feel his palms beginning to sweat. Gran Torino tilted his head, eyeing the list carefully. And you've narrowed it down to 8, he asked, a mix of surprise and curiosity in his voice. That's impressive. You know, I would have expected you to be more flustered, especially with all those offers. Most kids your age would have gone wild with excitement, maybe even started picking out the most famous agencies. Izuku nodded, his thoughts racing. I wanted to choose carefully. I'm not just looking for fame or recognition. I want to learn from heroes who are well-rounded. Heroes who will help me grow and teach me what I need to know. I like that mindset. Let me see the list, he asked. Izuku handed it to him and nodded. Gran Torino took the list from Izuku, his sharp eyes scanning over the names of the agencies one by one. Izuku felt a slight tension in the room, and he couldn't help but fidget in his seat. Gran Torino had a certain intensity that made him feel both respected and slightly intimidated. Oomph, Gran Torino grunted after a moment, his fingers tapping on the list. Endeavor, Edgeshot Best Genist, Gang Orca, Ryukyu, Hawks, Fat Gum, and Sir Naitai. Quite the selection you've got here, kid. Thank you, he said as he looked away from him. What I wanted to tell you was that because you have been offered by many heroes, I would like to tell you that I will also be there to help you alongside whoever you choose. I would have taken on all three of you, but because of the circumstances, I won't, he said, looking to the three of them. Though Enori, you keep proving yourself, and that might change one day, he said, assessing her. Enori didn't meet his eyes. Yes, sir, she said. All right, I will talk about this later, but your father needs to talk about something to Ichiro alone, so please step out for a moment, he said, going to the corner to watch what Toshinori would say. He handed Izuku the list and Enori, and he walked out, feeling like that went by in a blur. He shut the door as Enori looked down at the hallway, not seeing his eyes. She turned to him and spoke. You want to have that talk now? She asked. Izuku sighed and nodded. Sure, he said, walking over to a bench in the hallway with her sitting down a few seats away. They both sat in silence for a few minutes before Izuku spoke. You know, Enori, I don't 100% blame you and Ichiro for everything anyway, he said, making her look up. Why? She asked, whispering. Because Mom and Dad consistently fed yours as well as Ichiro's ego. So much to the point that you were on a high horse that you couldn't be knocked off, he said, looking at her. Enori's eyes softened as she listened to Izuku's words, but she still felt the weight of his previous judgment. It was clear that despite his attempt to understand, the pain of their past still lingered for both of them. However, I do blame you for what you did to me, Enori. It wasn't right. When you, Ichiro, and Bakugo would beat the hell out of me without an actual reason behind it. It was dumb and stupid. There were a few times when I went to the hospital myself. I eventually learned how to patch myself up just for that reason. The one I remember the most, though, was the day that you stepped in front of me when Bakugo tripped me, and I had enough of you SHD and push your face first into the locker. After school, you then proceeded to hold me and fling me around while Ichiro punched me in the chest. I bet you didn't know that I had a few broken ribs as well as a broken nose after that whole thing, but I had no one to go to because our parents didn't believe me. There wasn't a point in telling them, he said quietly. Enori remained silent as she absorbed his words, her face pale. She could see the weight of those memories in Izuku's eyes, and for the first time, it felt like he wasn't just speaking out of anger or resentment, but from a place of deep hurt. The hurt she had caused. The room between them felt heavy, the atmosphere thick with unspoken guilt and regret. I know. I really doubt that you could or would forgive me on that. There is nothing that can reverse that no matter how much I want it to, or hope that it will happen, she said, looking at him. I'm sorry for everything. You don't have to believe me. Just know that I am, like I said before, you won't get any problems from me. Not anymore, she said, wiping a tear from her face. Izuku glanced at her, his expression still torn between anger and the understanding that had started to form over the past few moments. The rawness of the situation was undeniable, and though he couldn't fully shake the resentment, something in his chest felt lighter. It wasn't a forgiveness, not yet, but there was a kind of uneasy peace settling between them. The words she spoke felt sincere, and for once, Izuku didn't feel like she was just saying what he wanted to hear. I appreciate you saying that, Enori, he said quietly, his voice hoarse. But you have to understand that it's going to take time. I'm still angry, and I can't just forget everything that happened, no matter how sorry you are. I know, Enori replied softly, her eyes downcast, focusing on the ground. I wouldn't expect you to forgive me right away, or at all. I don't deserve it, not after everything I did to you. Izuku clenched his fists, fighting the wave of emotions rushing through him. You don't get it, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. It wasn't just the fighting, Enori. It was how you all acted like I wasn't even there. Like I didn't matter. You, Ichiro, Bakugo, you were all part of that. I was invisible to you like I was some kind of punching bag. He paused, looking at her with a pained expression. I spent so many nights wondering because I even bothered trying to be a hero with people like you making my life hell. Enori flinched, her face contorting with the weight of his words. She had never really understood just how deep her actions had cut him. She had never stopped to think about how she and the others made him feel invisible, weak, like he wasn't even worthy of being seen as a person, let alone a hero. I know, was all she said, looking at him. Izuku looked at her, his eyes full of pain but also understanding, a tension still between them that could completely erase. I know you want to change, Enori. I saw it. I can see you change too. The other day, Kyoka came up to me and said you apologized to her. I didn't expect that. That's how I know you were changing, for the better anyway. Enori almost forgot she did that. Then something came to her mind. Izuku, why haven't you told anyone of what we did? Like the higher levels of you? Because if they caught wind of it, we wouldn't even be near the school. So why haven't you told anyone aside from a couple people? Izuku nodded at her question and decided to respond. Because I know that people can change. You are proof of that. I remember that I wanted nothing more than to have your names all over the streets saying Izuku was abused by his family, but I couldn't. I'm a guy who believes in second chances. Even if you treated me like SHD, I recognize that you and Ichiro want to be heroes. To be someone that can save others. I didn't want to take that away from either of you, or I am surprised that I didn't in the first place. You really believe people can change? Enori whispered, her voice shaky, as though testing the sincerity of her own words. Izuku met her eyes, his expression softening, but there was still a firmness to his gaze. I do. I don't want to be the kind of person who holds grudges forever. It doesn't do anyone any good. Not for me and not for you. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying I'm not still hurt, but I believe that if you want to change, you can. That's what being a hero is all about, right? Giving people the chance to be better. Enori had streams of tears falling from her face as she looked at her younger brother. "I will change," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "No matter what, I will make sure that I can be someone as worthy to be your sister again. I promise you that." Izuku glanced at her, his expression softening even further. "That's all I can ask for, Enori." The door to the room opened, and Enori wiped her tears away as Ichiro stood out. He looked over to Izuku with a blank look. Not anger, not frustration, not sadness, just a blank look. He turned to walk away, back to the dorms, just ignoring the two of them. Gran, Torino, and Tashinori came out of the hallway, seeing him walk away. "What happened in there?" asked Enori. "Nothing to worry about," said Tashinori. "We just had to talk about something from the tournament and the festival and other things, but Gran Torino has something for you, Izuku." He walked over and looked at him in the eyes. "Here's my info. Tell me who your decision is so that I can help you. I will get in contact with that hero, and then we shall go from there," he said, walking away. "I also know you two are the users, if you know what I mean. We will stay in touch," he said with them understanding what he meant immediately. "All right, you two. Go and get your stuff to head to the dorms and decide who you want to be with in the internships," said their father as he went back to the lounge. "Have a good night, you two." As Izuku and Enori stood in the hallway, the weight of their conversation still lingering in the air, they exchanged a brief glance before nodding to each other. Without another word, they turned and made their way toward the dorms, their thoughts heavy with everything that had been said. Izuku clutched the list Gran Torino had returned to him, his mind racing with the decision he had to make. He had narrowed it down to 8, but now, knowing that Gran Torino would be working with him no matter what, his choice carried even more weight. He needed to choose a mentor who would push him to be better, someone who could help him unlock his true potential. Walking side by side, Enori hesitated before finally speaking. "Izuku, I know you said you believe people can change, but do you really think Ichiro will?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Izuku sighed, staring straight ahead. "I don't know," he admitted. "Ichiro's different. You've shown that you regret what you did. You're making an effort. But Ichiro, I don't know if he's even acknowledged that he was wrong. Until he does, nothing will change." They walked in silence for a while longer, the cool night air brushing against them as they reached the dormitory building. As they stepped inside, Enori hesitated once more. "Izuku, thank you," she said sincerely, "for even giving me the chance to fix things." Izuku looked at her, his expression still guarded but less tense than before. "Like I said, it'll take time, but I hope you mean it." She nodded, determined. "I do." With that, they went their separate ways, Enori heading to her room, and Izuku making his way to his own, still gripping the list Gran Torino had given back to him. He sat down at his desk, staring at the names of the pro heroes he had selected. Endeavor, Edgeshot, Best Genist, Gang Orca, Ryukyu, Hawks, Fat Gum, Sir Naitai. Each of them had something to offer, each a powerhouse in their own right. He knew that any of them could help him grow. He knew that he might have many internships through the terms, so he could go with others in case something happens. He smirked as he thought of his answer. If Gran Torino was there, then he could help with his power as well as some other things to help. He smiled as he texted Gran Torino his answer and started to jog back to the dorms. The next day, Izuku was walking back with some of his friends and classmates from Class 1A and 1B as they talked to each other animatedly. "These internships are going to be nuts," said Tetsu as he slung around Kirishima. "Yeah, Kirishima and I are going to be under the same guy. He is the hero fourth kind." Izuku chuckled, catching Tetsu's enthusiasm. "Sounds like it's going to be intense." He looked over at Kirishima, who was grinning from ear to ear. "You two are going to be a force to be reckoned with." Kirishima nodded, his red hair spiking with excitement. "Fourth kind's got some wild abilities. I'm ready to go all in. I'm going with my dad and brother. I might as well. And not to mention they can help me control my fire and ice," said Todoroki calmly. Itsuka smirked. "I think that I will go with Iwabami." "You sure? What kind of hero do you want to be?" "She doesn't seem like that much of a fit for you," said Izuku with Itsuka, giving him a pout. "That is why I said I think." I might join Momo with what she is doing with Kimui Woods or something, she said, crossing her arms. That would be better, to be honest, said Kirishima, chuckling. What about you, Izuku? Asked Shoji, opening the door for the group as they made their way into the dorms. I decided that I would do mine with Edgeshot, he said, making the others not impressed. Edgeshot, huh? Tetsu said, raising an eyebrow with a grin. That's a pretty solid choice, Izuku. The guy's a freaking ninja. You'll probably learn a lot of stealth and precision from him. Izuku nodded, a hint of excitement creeping into his chest. I think so. His quirk is so versatile, and he's been known to get in and out of situations without even being noticed. If I can learn how to move more strategically, I'll be able to think on my feet more. Plus, Izuku continued, I think his style of thinking could really help me out. He's precise and always thinking ahead, and that's something I can apply not just in combat, but in other situations too. Kirishima grinned, clearly impressed. Man, you're gonna be a beast after that. Stealth and strategy, huh? Just don't let Edgeshot get too far ahead of you. Otherwise, you'll lose him, literally. Izuku laughed softly. I'll try to keep up, but I'm sure he'll be teaching me a lot more than just that. It'll be a good challenge. They reached the common area of the dorms, where most of their classmates were starting to settle down. The energy was high, with everyone buzzing about their internships and their plans for the coming weeks. It was clear that this was a major step in everyone's journey toward becoming pro heroes. Izuku looked around and nodded to himself. He had an idea. He would make everyone an awesome dinner for all the hard work they were about to do. He would just have to go to the grocery store to get some stuff because they had Jack SHT. He quickly ran to his room to get his wallet and change into some clothes. He put on a black long sleeve with white sweatpants and his red shoes as he slid on the railing down the stairs. He was hoping not to be noticed, but he was stopped when Tokoyami called out to him. Izuku, where are you off to in such a hurry? Tokoyami called out from across the room, his deep voice drawing everyone's attention. Just going to the store real quick. I'm going to make everyone a meal for how hard we all have been working. Want to come with me? He offered to him. Tokoyami shrugged his shoulders as he stood up. Why not? Might as well help you with all the ingredients and food for 40 people in the dorms. Todoroki peered out from right around the corner and looked at the two of them. Did someone say food? He asked, making Izuku and even Tokoyami jump. Izuku blinked, surprised by his sudden appearance. Oh yeah, I'm going to the store to grab some ingredients for dinner. Thought I'd make something nice for everyone since we've all been working so hard. Todoroki raised an eyebrow, his cool composure still intact, but there was no hiding the slight interest in his expression. You cooking, Izuku? That's unexpected. Izuku scratched the back of his head, a little embarrassed. Well, I figured it'd be nice to do something for everyone before we head into our internships. You know, a little team bonding before it gets hectic. Tokoyami, who had already been leaning toward the idea of helping Izuku, now seemed more intrigued by Todoroki's presence. Are you interested in joining us, Todoroki? He asked, his voice low and steady. Todoroki tilted his head slightly, as if contemplating. I don't know, but if there's food involved, I'm willing to give a shot. Besides, I can't let you two handle all that by yourselves, especially if it's for the entire dorm. Let's just say it's an offer of help, he said with a slight smirk. That made Izuku's stomach flutter in excitement. Great, Izuku exclaimed, relieved that Todoroki was on board. Thanks, Todoroki. I wasn't sure how I was going to manage it all by myself. Don't worry, Izuku, Todoroki replied, walking closer. I'm sure it'll be fine. If it's edible, I'll be impressed. With the trio now headed to the store, Izuku's mind buzzed with ideas for the meal. He was excited but a little nervous. He was thinking about what to make everyone. He needed a meal with the basics for something filling and good. Meat, fruit, veggies, rice, and finally dessert. It was only 1 p.m., so he had plenty of time. They got to the supermarket and grabbed a cart to get what they needed. Izuku, what do you think is suitable for this meal? Asked Tokoyami. I was thinking chicken mainly, and some fish for some variety, and have some rice too. Then some fruits and vegetables. Then dessert, he said, looking at the aisle numbers for where the food was. Sounds reasonable, Tokoyami said with a nod. A well-balanced meal will keep everyone in top condition for what's ahead. Todoroki hummed in agreement. I assume you have a plan for how to cook everything without it taking all night. Well, yeah. I know how to cook and bake if need be. I am not MSTR chief, but I think I can cook pretty well, he said, smiling. You can cook. You never said that before, said Tokomi, raising a brow. Izuku chuckled nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. Well, it's not like it ever came up in conversation. Very well. Let's go to the meat section then, said Tokomi, nodding at Izuku. They walked over to the meat section, and Izuku looked at the chicken and fish. You guys good with chicken BRSD and tights with salmon. The salmon is good for muscle recovery. Chicken BRSD and thighs sound good to me, Todoroki replied, glancing at the selection of salmon. And salmon is a solid choice. Rich in protein and omega-3s. Good for recovery and endurance. I'm fine with that too, nodded Tokomi. Izuku grabbed several packs of chicken and salmon, loading them into the cart. All right, that's the protein done. Next up, rice. The trio made their way to the grain aisle, where Izuku picked up a large bag of rice. This should be enough for everyone, he said, testing the weight before placing it into the cart. Todoroki studied the shelves. Do we need any seasonings? Plain rice will be pretty bland. Izuku smiled, already a step ahead. Good call. I was thinking of making some garlic butter rice with herbs. Add some flavor, but isn't too overpowering. Tokomi glanced at Izuku. You sound like you've done this before. I get bored sometimes, he said, pouting and looking at the ground. Tokomi and Todoroki exchanged a glance before Todoroki smirked slightly. So, when you're not training or analyzing quirks, you're in the kitchen experimenting. Izuku nodded. I have a very specific set of skills. Skills that I have acquired over a long PRD of time. Nice movie reference, said Tokomi, amused slightly. Izuku smiled at him when he felt someone tugging at his pants. The three of them looked to see a kid around 7 years old smiling at Izuku. Excuse me, mister, are you from the sports festival on TV? Izuku or something, he asked excitedly. Izuku blinked in surprise before crouching down slightly to meet the kid's eye level. Oh, yeah, I was in the sports festival. He scratched the back of his head, feeling a little awkward but also flattered. Did you watch it? The little boy nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, you were so cool. You went boom, and then whoosh, and then smash. He mimicked the movements of some of Izuku's fights, swinging his arms wildly, almost toppling over in the process. Izuku chuckled. That sounds about right. You two were also in the battles. You were the fire and ice guy, and you were the black and dark bird dude, he said, pointing to Tokomi and Todoroki. Tokomi exhaled quietly but nodded. That is an accurate, if somewhat simplified, assessment of our abilities. Todoroki, on the other hand, merely gave a small nod. Fire and ice guy works, I suppose. The boy's eyes sparkled with excitement. Can I get a picture with you guys? Izuku looked to see the boy's mother walking towards them with her phone. She likely told him to go and talk to them, which was cool. Izuku smiled warmly at the kid. Of course. We'd be happy to take a picture with you. The little boy's face lit up with joy as his mother handed over the phone to Izuku. Thank you so much. He's a huge fan of all of you, she said, looking between them. Izuku crouched down again, giving a thumbs up while Tokomi stood to the boy's left, his arms crossed in his usual cool demeanor. Todoroki simply placed a hand in his pocket, but nodded slightly, his expression neutral, yet not unkind. All right, say plus ultra, Izuku prompted with a grin. Plus ultra. The boy cheered as his mother snapped the picture. After checking the photo, the mother beamed at them. Thank you so much. You've made his day. Izuku chuckled. No problem. I'm glad we could. The boy looked up at them, still bouncing with excitement. I want to be a hero like you guys someday. You can do it, Izuku encouraged. Just keep training and don't give up, no matter what. The boy nodded determinedly before his mother gently ushered him away. Come on now, let's let them finish their shopping. Bye, Mr. Izuku. Bye, Fire and Ice Guy. Bye, Bird Dude, he called out as he waved. Take care, Tokomi replied with a small nod. Todoroki exhaled, shaking his head slightly. Must be nice to have someone remember you by name, Izuku. At least my name wasn't something like Bird Dude, he said, smiling to himself. I will admit, I expected something a bit more dignified, Tokoimi said with a sigh, though there was a trace of amusement in his voice. With that, the trio resumed their shopping. Let's see. I need some broccoli. What do you guys want for dessert? Some like fruit salad to keep it healthy, or do you want something sweet? He asked as he put broccoli in the cart. Izuku glanced at Todoroki and Tokoimi as they walked down the aisle. The two of them seemed lost in their thoughts for a moment before Todoroki spoke up. Fruit salad sounds good. It's refreshing after a meal like this. Tokoimi raised an eyebrow. I would not be opposed to something more decadent. Perhaps a chocolate cake. All right, so both then, he said, getting lots of strawberries, cantaloupe, and honeydew. Now, let's get the rest of the cake ingredients. He quickly made his way down the baking aisle, grabbing flour, sugar, cocoa powder, and a few other essentials for the cake. Meanwhile, Todoroki walked beside him, pushing the cart with one hand, his other hand in his pocket. Tokoimi lingered behind, scanning the shelves with a more focused look on his face, as if the whole shopping trip was some kind of mission. So, do you guys think we'll be able to find some time to relax soon? Izuku asked as he carefully chose the right baking powder. I feel like the last few weeks have been nonstop, with school, training, and everything else. Todoroki gave a short exhale, his lips twitching upward in a faint smile. A break sounds nice, but I don't think it'll happen anytime soon. There's always something to do, whether it's preparing for the internships or continuing to improve ourselves. The work never stops. Izuku nodded thoughtfully. I know what you mean. It's like, no matter how much you want to take a step back, there's always something pushing you forward. That's the life of a hero, Tokoimi added, his voice surprisingly serious for someone whose usual demeanor was so composed. It's a constant battle, not just against villains, but against yourself. You have to keep pushing forward if you want to be the best. But I do know the teachers and admin are required to give breaks, because we are only 15 years old after all. Not like we were 23 or something. Fair point. You are doing your internship with Hawks than Tokoimi, he asked as he put more stuff into their carts. Yes, indeed. It should be nice. He is the number 3 hero after all, he said, nodding once more. Soon all of the ingredients Izuku needed were collected, and they checked out with the food and started to make their way back. Izuku hummed in thought. Now how am I going to get this through without being seen, he said to himself. You don't want anyone seeing this stuff. Oh yeah, you said it was a surprise, said Tokoimi. We will be fine. Let's just use Dark Shadow to hide it all, offered Todoroki as he pointed to him. Izuku nodded eagerly. Great idea, Todoroki. We'll just have Dark Shadow carry everything. That way, no one will notice until it's time for the big reveal. He smiled, relieved that they had a plan. The last thing he wanted was for the others to spoil his surprise. Tokoimi shot him with a knowing look. You're lucky I'm willing to cooperate with your plan, Izuku. Just make sure you don't end up with too much cake in your hands. Otherwise, I might have to step in to help out, he said with a smirk, walking ahead of the group. You just want some cake, don't you, Tokoimi? Said Izuku, smiling at his friend. Who wouldn't? He said, smirking as they walked onto the school grounds. Soon they were at the doors of the dorms, and he activated Dark Shadow, who grabbed all the supplies, and they made their way to the large kitchen. As they entered the kitchen, Izuku quickly set up his workspace, laying out the ingredients with practiced hands. Tokoimi, his usual calm self, immediately began scanning the area for anything that could potentially disrupt the surprise. His sharp eyes were always looking out for possible distractions. I'll have Dark Shadow keep watch while you work, Izuku, he said, his voice low and composed, though there was a hint of anticipation in his tone. Todoroki, on the other hand, walked over to the fridge and placed the ingredients that needed chilling inside. Let me know if you need help with anything. I'll be in the living room if you need me. Actually, could you chop up the fruit for the fruit salad? Tokoimi, could you get the water set to boil the rice? I'll get the salmon and chicken and other stuff ready. If they smell it then, they do, but it'll be fine, he said as he started to open up the packs of food. Todoroki nodded and began prepping the fruit for the fruit salad, carefully slicing strawberries, honeydew, and cantaloupe. His movements were precise, but there was a slight air of relaxation about him, as if this task was a welcome distraction from his usual intensity. Meanwhile, Tokoyami took a few steps towards the stove, activating Dark Shadow to keep watch as he turned on the kettle and set it on the burner. The dark, feathered figure watched over everything with a vigilant, almost intimidating presence, its glowing eyes scanning the room. Izuku, who was already busy with the salmon and chicken, hummed to himself as he began seasoning the meat. He glanced over his shoulder, noting that everything was falling into place. The kitchen felt surprisingly calm despite the flurry of activity happening in the space. It was almost as if the team had fallen into a rhythm. "All right, I've got the rice boiling," Tokoyami said, his voice smooth and controlled as always. "Do you want me to start on the garlic butter for the rice?" "Yeah, that'd be great," Izuku replied, turning his attention back to the chicken. He seasoned it with garlic powder, paprika, and a pinch of salt before placing it on a grill pan. The scent of the spices began to fill the kitchen, adding to the growing layers of delicious smells. "Thanks, Tokoyami." With a nod, Tokoyami grabbed the butter and garlic, melting them in a pan on the stove. His movements were practiced, though his usual seriousness never wavered. As the garlic sizzled, he added herbs, parsley, thyme, and rosemary, creating a rich, savory aroma. Todoroki finished chopping the fruit and began arranging it in a large bowl. The vibrant colors of the fruit combined in a visually pleasing way, making it look as if it belonged on the cover of a recipe book. He added a little honey to the mix to give it a touch of sweetness. "It will 100% be enough for 40 people. This fruit bowl is huge," he said. Izuku chuckled as he glanced over at the massive fruit salad. "Perfect. It looks like we're going to have a feast." He returned his focus to the chicken and salmon, flipping the pieces carefully. The sizzling sound of the meat on the grill pan was accompanied by the soft hum of the rice as it began to boil. Tokoyami focused on the garlic butter simmering on the stove. With careful hands, he stirred the sauce, making sure the garlic and butter blended smoothly with the herbs, creating a rich and flavorful aroma that made the kitchen smell even more delicious. Izuku grabbed a tray and began plating the salmon and chicken, the grill marks adding a appealing color to the meat. The anticipation for the big surprise dinner was growing, and Izuku couldn't help but smile at how well everything was coming together. "You're all set for the garlic butter sauce?" Izuku asked Tokoyami as he moved the grilled chicken and salmon to the side to rest. "Just about," Tokoyami responded, his focus unwavering as he carefully poured the garlic butter sauce over the rice. He paused for a moment, taking a moment to appreciate how everything was coming together. "I have to admit, Izuku, your cooking skills are impressive." "Thank you," he said, grinning. They then heard something coming from the doorway. "What's that smell?" said a feminine voice. Izuku sighed at that voice. "Make sure that Setsuna doesn't get in here, Tokoyami," he said, with him nodding. "Dark Shadow has us covered," he said as Dark Shadow went to the doorway. "Dark Shadow, block the entrance," Tokoyami said calmly, his voice barely above a whisper as a shadowy familiar stretched across the doorway, effectively stopping anyone from entering. "Hey, what's going on here?" she asked, her hands resting on her hips as she peered inside, eyes scanning the busy kitchen. The overwhelming aroma of the grilled food and garlic butter rice filled the air, making her stomach rumble audibly. "This smells incredible, and I've got a good nose, you know. Where are you guys hiding?" Dark Shadow waved his hands in front of him. "Nothing." Setsuna chuckles. "I call bull on that. So, let's see, Tokoyami is here, just based off of Dark Shadow," she said, trying to look around him. She then saw Izuku and smirked even more. "Oh my gosh, Izuku is in here. Now I got to see," she said, separating herself into pieces. "Sorry, ma'am, you aren't on the VIP list," said Dark Shadow, trying to stop her. Setsuna grinned mischievously, her body disassembling into pieces, slipping through the gaps in the door. "You really think you can keep me out?" she asked, her voice coming from all directions as her fragmented form reassembled just inside the kitchen. Her smirk plastered across her face. Izuku now, caught in the act, sighed, knowing there was no stopping her now. He gave Tokoyami an apologetic look. "I guess the surprise is blown," he muttered, not entirely surprised by her usual antics. Setsuna bounced into the kitchen with a gleam of curiosity in her eyes widening as she saw the spread of food being prepared. The grill marks on the chicken and salmon, the garlic butter rice simmering with herbs, and the vibrant fruit salad that sat on the counter. All of it made her stomach growl louder. Wow, okay. You guys have been busy. Is this all for me? Or are you planning to feed the whole school? She teased, eyeing the large portions of food. Well, it was supposed to be for the 40 of us before we all head off to our internships, said Izuku as he started to work on getting the chocolate cake mix ready. Setsuna raised an eyebrow, her mischievous grin widening even more as she looked at Izuku. Oh, 40, huh? You were going to keep this a secret from me. You know I have a thing for chocolate cake, she said, her voice dripping with playful sarcasm. I'm hurt, really, but I'll let it slide since it smells so good. You have chicken, salmon, rice, fruit, and cakes. You should have just asked me out on a date. It's not like that, he stammered, clearly flustered. I was just trying to make something nice for everyone before we all leave for our internships. It's for all of us. No special reason, I swear. Setsuna let out a playful laugh, her eyes glinting with mischief. I'm just messing with you, Izuku, she teased, leaning against the counter. But seriously, this spread is impressive. Who knew you had it in you? Izuku chuckled awkwardly, running his hand through his hair. I like to cook sometimes. It's a nice way to relax. He turned his attention back to the chocolate cake mix, trying to focus on getting everything ready. The cake's for dessert. I'm hoping it'll turn out well. Well, do you guys need help, she asked, just to set out the stuff on the counters in here. It's quite a bit for 40 people, especially when there's like hundreds of pieces of chicken and lots of salmon, he said, helping Tokoyami with rice and garlic butter. All right, I can do that, she said, walking over to them to get the chicken from near the stove. Izuku nodded as Setsuna walked over, her energy as high as ever. Thanks, Setsuna, he said, trying to focus on the next steps in the meal prep while she got to work. Tokoyami, still standing with his usual composure, glanced over at Setsuna's action. Just be careful with the chicken, Setsuna. We don't want anything to go wrong now. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of seriousness as he spoke, though it was likely more out of habit than concern. Setsuna, unfazed by his caution, grinned widely. Don't worry, I've got it under control, she said, beginning to carefully set out the chicken pieces on the counter, making sure everything was arranged neatly. It's nice to see everyone working together like this. I feel like we should make more of these team dinners, if only to show off how great I am at organizing food. She gave Izuku a playful wink. About 20 minutes later, the food was ready to go, and the cakes were in the oven now. They just need to bake while they can eat all. It was about 5 o'clock, and nearly everyone smelled what was cooking in the kitchen, and they were curious about what was going on. Guess you can't keep it a secret anymore, Izuku, said Tokoyami. Yeah, that's all right. It's almost time to eat the main course anyway, said Izuku, finishing mixing the rice. Izuku nodded, his excitement bubbling as he turned his attention to the oven, where the cakes were just about done. The smell of the main course had already made its way down the hall, and he could tell that the others were starting to get hungry. We should do this again, he said, smiling. Setsuna, who had been busy organizing the spread, turned toward him with a playful grin. Oh, I'm sure we'll be doing this more often now that we know your hiding cooking skills. You might even start a new trend around here, she teased, her fingers running along the edges of the fruit salad bowls as she added the finishing touches. Todoroki, who had been quietly monitoring the progress of the dishes, finally spoke up. You really have thought of everything. It's impressive how much work went into this. I'm glad I could help, he said, his usual reserved demeanor softening in the warmth of the moment. Yeah, me too, Tokoyami chimed in. I think it's time to tell them it's ready. Izuku walked over to the doorway to call to everyone in Class 1A and 1B. Time to eat, guys, he said with everyone getting up from their seats in the large common area. As more students filed into the kitchen, their eyes widening at the sight of the spread, a chorus of exclamations filled the room. Whoa, this looks incredible, Kirishima exclaimed, his usual enthusiasm matching the energy in the room. Izuku bro, you made all this. Izuku chuckled nervously. I had some help from everyone. He gestured to Tokoyami, Todoroki, and Setsuna, who were all standing nearby, giving the scene a mix of casual coolness and sly grins. "Looks like we have enough food for a small army," Shiro joked, rubbing his hands together as he eyed the chicken and salmon with hunger. "This is going to be amazing," Mina added, eagerly bouncing in place. "I could really use a good meal like this before we head off for internships." Izuku felt a wave of relief wash over him. The stress of keeping everything a secret and preparing such an elaborate meal was melting away, replacing with the warmth of seeing his friends and classmates enjoying the fruits of their LBR. "Okay, everyone, help yourselves," Izuku said with a grin, stepping aside to give the others room to dig in. As they all crowded around, plates quickly filled up with chicken, salmon, rice, and the vibrant fruit salad. Setsuna, who had been grinning the entire time, now took a seat, eyeing her plate with approval. "I guess I can forgive you for hiding all this from me," she teased, reaching for a piece of chicken. Todoroki, now seated at the table, nodded in satisfaction. "This is really good, Izuku. You should cook more often." Tokoyami, ever the quiet one, simply gave a slight nod of approval, his attention focused more on his meal than the conversation. As everyone dug in, the energy in the room lit up. The hard work that went into making the dinner paid off, and the laughter and chatter around the table felt like a much-needed respite from the pressures of being a hero in training. "Thanks for doing all this, Izuku," Enori said from across the table, his voice softened by a mouthful of rice and chicken. "I'll admit, this is good." Ichiro nodded as he ate the rice. "I guess this is good," he said just loud enough for Izuku to hear him. Izuku smiled at everyone's reactions. "Since when could you cook?" asked Jiro, surprised, but ate the food faster than normal. Momo looked up at him. "Yeah, you never told us." "Since always, and it was never brought up." "This SHD is awesome," said Tetsu, scarfing down his food. "I have to agree," said Monoma. "I've got nothing sarcastic to say," he said, eating some fruit salad. "Are you sure you're not secretly a professional chef?" Urarika asked, pausing between bites of chicken and rice. Her face lit up with genuine amazement. "This is incredible, Izuku." Izuku scratched the back of his head, trying to downplay the praise. "I just follow the recipes and enjoy cooking. It's not that big a deal," he said, though his smile was full of pride. Kaminari, already on his third serving of chicken, raised his hand dramatically. "I nominate Izuku to make all our meals from now on. This is like restaurant-level good." He stuffed more food in his mouth, clearly not bothering with manners. "Honestly, I didn't think you had it in you, bro." Izuku ate his dinner with gusto, and it honestly was pretty good. He at least wanted to do something for everyone. He then heard the oven go off, and he walked away for a minute to get the 3 cakes out of the oven. He pulled them out and carefully set them on the counter to cool. Sato looked in the direction of the kitchen with narrow eyes. "My baker sense is tingling right now." The room seemed to be quiet for a moment, as everyone turned their attention to the cooling cakes. Sato's playful comment only added to the anticipation, and soon everyone was craning their necks to get a look at the treats. Izuku was in the kitchen, got out the chocolate frosting, started to open it when he felt someone tap his shoulder. He looked to see Yui Kodai in his face, and he jumped in surprise. She mumbled something that caught his attention. "Cake," she said, pointing to it. Izuku looked at her. "Yeah, that cake. I need for it to cool off before I put the frosting on it." "Cake," she said once more. Izuku blinked, a little taken aback by Yui's enthusiasm, and chuckled nervously. "Yeah, the cake. You'll have to wait for a bit before I can frost it, though. It needs to cool down first." Yui's expression shifted from eager anticipation to one of deep concentration. She stared at the cakes, and then back at Izuku, nodding slowly as if processing this important information. "Cool down," she repeated, as though saying the words out loud would make the wait seem less excruciating. Izuku smiled softly at her, admiring how seriously she took this, but also feeling a little amused. "You're really looking forward to it, huh?" Yui nodded vigorously, still transfixed by the cakes. "I like cake," she mumbled under her breath, as if that was all the explanation anyone needed. Her eyes never left the dessert, her hands wringing together impatiently. "It'll be a bit. Let your stomach settle, and it will be done cooling off," he said, putting the frosting down. Kodai sighed and nodded at him, but turned around, walking away from the kitchen. "Is that cake in there, Izuku?" asked Sato. "Yeah, it is. I need to give it time to cool off before we can eat it," he called out to them. Izuku waited in the kitchen for the cakes, as some of his classmates and friends walked in to wash their dishes. Itsuko was standing there with a smirk off to the side with Kodai, holding her by the shoulders, peeking over her. "Cake?" Kodai asked once more, making Izuku laugh. "Just a couple more minutes." Izuku chuckled at Yui's unrelenting enthusiasm. "You really like cake, huh?" he asked, amused. Yui nodded enthusiastically, her eyes locked on the cakes like a hawk, her hands gripping tighter at Itsuka's shoulders in anticipation. "Cake," she repeated softly, almost as if it were a sacred word. Itsuka, watching the exchange with a smirk, leaned against the counter beside them. "She has always been a fan of cake, so don't mind her," she teased, her gaze flicking between Izuku and the eagerly waiting Yui. Izuku grinned, feeling a warmth in his chest at the sight of everyone enjoying themselves. "I didn't realize cake was such a big deal," he said with a playful shrug. "Well, it's cake," Itsuka said matter-of-factly. "Who doesn't love cake?" The group of students in the kitchen began to finish cleaning up their plates, and the energy in the room shifted slightly as everyone seemed to be drawn back to the sight of the cooling desserts. Some were still lingering around the counter, talking and laughing, but most couldn't help but steal glances at the cakes, eagerly waiting for them to be ready. After a few minutes, Izuku looked down at the cakes. They had cooled sufficiently, and it was time. He grabbed the chocolate frosting and began spreading it over the first cake. As he worked, he noticed several of his classmates beginning to gather around the counter again, and he could feel the anticipation in the air. "All right, I think we're good now," Izuku said with a satisfied nod as he finished the last cake. He turned around to find most of his friends standing nearby, practically hovering in place as they waited for the moment to dive in. Yui was right there, her eyes practically sparkling. "Cake now?" she asked again, her voice almost pleading. Izuku laughed softly. "Yes, it's ready. I'll get you guys slices." Without another word, Yui immediately grabbed a plate and hurried over to the cake, her eagerness palpable. The others quickly followed suit, their eyes glued to the cake like a flock of birds on the hunt. "I've got to admit, Izuku," Kirishima said, taking a generous slice of cake for himself, "you've really outdone yourself with this dinner and the cake. This is next level." "I'm just happy it turned out well," Izuku replied, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "I wasn't sure how the cakes would turn out, but I'm glad they're being enjoyed." As the first slice of cake was placed onto Yui's plate, she wasted no time in picking up her fork and taking a bite. The moment the rich chocolate flavor hit her tongue, her usual stoic expression softened just a bit, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "Good," she murmured in approval, nodding once before immediately taking another bite. Izuku grinned, feeling oddly proud of the reaction. Before he could say anything else, the rest of the class descended upon the cakes like a pack of starving wolves. "All right, one at a time," he called, laughing as everyone eagerly reached for their own slice. "Izuku, this might actually be the best cake I've ever had," Kaminari declared dramatically, already halfway through his piece. "No joke. I feel like I've been lied to my whole life about what cake should taste like." "That's because you usually eat store-bought snacks," Jiro pointed out, rolling her eyes as she took a smaller, more refined bite. She paused, her own expression shifting slightly before she gave Izuku an approving nod. "But, yeah, this is really good. As a baker myself, I give it 8. 7 out of 10. That's pretty DMN good," said Sato, eating the cake. Izuku chuckled at the praise, rubbing the back of his head. "I'm really glad you guys like it. I just wanted to do something nice for everyone." Everyone enjoyed the meal that was provided for them when Izuku noticed one person was gone. Ida. He frowned, knowing that he was missing out on this. But family is important for a lot of people, and when your brother DMN near dies, it's natural to want to be near him. He would save him a piece of cake. Izuku carefully set aside a slice of cake for Ida, wrapping it up so it would stay fresh for when his friend returned. He knew how much Ida valued responsibility and DSBLN, and he imagined that even something as simple as a homemade cake might serve as a small comfort during such a difficult time. "Not bad, nerd," Bakugo muttered after finishing his slice and walking away. Everyone soon settled down and were all lying on the couch in the common area, holding their stomachs. That's how Izuku knew it was a good meal. Thankfully, there were no leftovers, so there was that, aside from Ida's cake. Izuku finished eating his slice of cake and walked over to the sink to wash his dish. Everyone said it was amazing, and they were grateful for the meal, which made him happy. Now all that was left to prepare themselves for their internships. He felt his phone buzz. He looked at his phone, and it was a call from Mr. Aizawa. A better question was how the hell did he got his number? "Hello?" he asked questioningly. Yagi said sternly, "Make your way to the support course development studio. Power Loader is expecting you for something, but he didn't tell me what. Be there in 10 minutes. Izuku straightened at the unexpected request, his mind already buzzing with questions. "Yes, sir. I'll head there now," he replied quickly before Aizawa hung up. Why would Power Loader want to see him? The support course rarely had any direct involvement with hero training unless it was for costume adjustments. Did this have something to do with his internship? Shaking off his confusion for now, Izuku grabbed a napkin and wiped his hands before making his way out of the common room. His classmates were still sprawled out, lost in their food comas, though a few waved lazily as he left. The walk to the support course development studio was quiet, the halls mostly empty at this hour. The faint hum of machinery and the occasional sound of welding echoed through the corridors as he neared the workshop. When he arrived, the door slid open with a hiss, revealing the bustling workspace of the support course. Various students were hard at work, tinkering with gadgets, modifying hero suits, and testing new prototypes. The scent of oil, metal, and burning circuits filled the air. Standing near the back of the room was Power Loader, arms crossed, his signature yellow helmet and clawed gloves making him stand out even in the sea of inventors. Beside him, with an excited grin and a smudge of grease on her cheek, was none other than Mei Hatsum. "Izuku Yagi, come over here for a second," said Power Loader. "I know we haven't talked much, but I am Power Loader, the teacher for the support course and the hero course. This here is Mei Hatsum," he said with her bouncing around. "Nice to meet you both. Mr. Aizawa said that you need to see me about something," he said, walking over to the two of them. "Yes, we do. About 3 things, actually," he said, stepping to the side to show him the Sound Gauntlets Mark II, the Formuband, and the Volt Vanguards. Izuku went wide-eyed at what he meant. These were the inventions that he made for Momo, Jiro, and Kaminari. "I think you know why you are here now. Now, we haven't touched them yet, but we wanted to ask you how you were able to think about something like this. Most hero course students don't really think about stuff like this. I like to see what happens in the minds of other students, and your mind has me spinning," he said, Mei still bouncing around. "Well," Izuku started, rubbing the back of his neck, "I guess I just wanted to help my classmates in ways that made sense for their quirks. Jiro Sound Gauntlets Mark II are meant to amplify and direct her heartbeat vibrations better, giving her more precision and power, and she doesn't have to use her earphone jacks. Momo's Formuband is to help her scan the object around her to see what they are made of, and so she doesn't have to remember every little thing when she creates an object. And Kaminari's Volt Vanguards, well, if he can't control electricity in one direction, I could give him something to channel in streams." Power Loader nodded, clearly impressed. "That's a solid breakdown of your reasoning. You're not just thinking about making something flashy, you're engineering solutions tailored to your classmates' specific needs. That's what a good support engineer does." Mei, who had been silent for a whole 5 seconds, a record for her, suddenly burst into excitement. "And they're so well designed. The integration between function and form, the way you've optimized power efficiency, chef's kiss. Yagi, you've got a brain for tech, and I love that." She leaned in, eyes gleaming with curiosity. "So, tell me, what other ideas do you have rattling around in that head of yours? Got any upgrades in mind already?" "All right, Mei, simmer down. I brought you here to see if you would like to work in the support course from time to time. You got a bright mind. You wouldn't necessarily be in the class itself, but could come and work in here when you can. Think of it like an honorary support course student. You could run by a few ideas, build stuff, and learn what works best, said Power Loader, offering. Izuku blinked in surprise at the offer. An honorary support course student. He had always been interested in hero support gear, but he never considered actually working alongside the support course. His mind immediately raced with possibilities. Ideas for improving his classmates' gear, ways to enhance his own costume, and even designs that could help other heroes in the future. He looked at Power Loader, then at May, who was practically vibrating with excitement. I'd really like that, he admitted, a small smile forming on his face. I've always been interested in support gear, and if I can learn more while helping others, then I'd be happy to contribute. Power Loader nodded approvingly. Good. You're not officially part of the support course, so you won't have assignments or projects like the other students, but you'll have access to the resources here when you have time. If you want to work on something specific, you can coordinate with me or Hatsum. With that, Hatsum jumped right into his face and started to ask him loads of questions. How did you come up with the ideas for those 3 babies over there? What are you going to do next? Do you need help with it? Izuku took a half step back as Hatsum leaned in, her eyes sparkling with curiosity and excitement. Before he could respond, she unleashed a barrage of rapid-fire questions. Oh, and what kind of materials did you use? Did you think about integrating nanotech? What's your stance on kinetic energy conversion? Have you thought about making an energy regulator for Kaminari's gauntlets? What's your opinion on electromagnetic shielding? Ooh, what about a self-repairing function? That could be fun. And tell me, do you plan on making something for yourself? What kind of hero tech would you design for your own quirk? Izuku felt his brain short-circuit for a moment as he processed the wave of questions. He knew Hatsum was energetic, but this was something else. He raised his hand slightly, laughing nervously. Hold on, one question at a time. Power Loader sighed, shaking his head. Hatsum breathed. May pouted, but relented, only slightly. She took a deep breath, then immediately leaned in again. Okay, but seriously, Yagi, you got to tell me, do you have any new projects in mind? Because I need to see what else is rolling around in that big brain of yours. Izuku considered that for a moment, rubbing his chin. Truthfully, he did have a few ideas. With the internships coming up, he'd been thinking about ways to improve not only his classmates' gear, but also his fighting capabilities. I was thinking about making something related to the wind pressurized attacks I can do. Some more precise when I snap my fingers rather than something that spreads out, he said, making the snapping motion. I haven't started it because of our internships coming up. May's eyes widened as if Izuku had just handed her the greatest treasure in the world. She vibrated with excitement. Oh, so like concentrated air blasts. That's genius. If we design a mechanism that refines the way the pressure builds up before release, you could create something with way more precision. Yeah, I thought it would be better that way because then I don't risk hitting someone if they're my allies or teammates, or even causing unnecessary damage. Maybe use some micro sensors so that it knows what finger I'm snapping. Then also something with shock absorption to handle the power I am channeling into my finger snaps, he said, starting to ramble on. Izuku's mind raced with possibilities as he continued, his fingers instinctively mimicking the snapping motion. If I can refine the output, I could use it for pinpoint attacks instead of broad bursts. Maybe even have adjustable settings depending on the situation. If I need to push back multiple enemies, I could keep it wide, but for direct hits, I could focus the force into a smaller, more concentrated blast. Hatsum practically vibrated in place. Yes, yes. And if we use a variable compression chamber, oh, or maybe a rapid response pressure modulator, no wait. We could integrate microturbines to further regulate output. Oh, this is going to be so cool. Power Loader rubbed his temple. Hatsum, pace yourself. We don't even have a prototype yet. May step back inside. All right, sorry. It's fine, said Izuku, but I should be going back now. Thank you for allowing me to work in here. Power Loader gave a firm nod. Of course. Just remember, this is an opportunity, not an obligation. You come in when you have time, and if you need any guidance, you know where to find me. Izuku bowed slightly in gratitude. Thank you again. I'll do my best. As he turned to leave, Hatsum shot forward again, nearly bumping into him. Wait. You can't just drop an idea like that and leave. If you're serious about making this, We need to start brainstorming now. Or at least like tomorrow. Izuku chuckled nervously. I'll try to find time after the internship starts. I don't want to rush something like this. May pouted but quickly nodded. Fine, fine. But you better not let that genius brain of yours go to waste. I want to see results, Yagi. He gave her a small smile. I'll make sure to keep you updated. As he finally left the support course workshop, the cool air of the hallway was a stark contrast to the bustling energy inside. He took a deep breath, letting the weight of the offer and everything that had just happened settle in. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. 3 days later, it was nearly time for Izuku to leave, but he had to meet with someone before he left for Edgeshot's agency. Hound Dog asked to meet with him. He didn't know why, but it was likely for his weekly meeting since he wouldn't be able to do it all. It was 4:51 a.m. right now, and he was at his office. He knocked on the door when he heard a voice. Come in, he called out. Izuku opened the door and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, with only a single desk lamp casting a soft glow over Hound Dog's desk. The man was seated in his usual spot, the ever-present aura of professionalism hanging over him, even at this early hour. His sharp features softened only slightly when he noticed Izuku entering, but there was a noticeable warmth in his eyes. Izuku, good morning, Hound Dog greeted, pushing aside a few files on his desk. I know this is a bit earlier than usual, but I wanted to talk before you head off for your internship. Izuku nodded, slightly confused but intrigued. Of course, sir. What's this about? He moved to sit across from the older hero, trying to gauge the mood. Hound Dog leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. I just wanted to have a quick conversation. During the sports festival, Mr. Aizawa said that you were acting different in your fight with Enori. Is there a reason for that? He asked thoughtfully. Izuku froze a little bit, not sure how to answer. Well, I was nervous to fight one of the people that bullied me growing up. It was pretty hard for obvious reasons. Hound Dog's gaze softened as Izuku spoke, sensing the weight behind his words. He leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but full of understanding. I see. That would certainly make things more difficult. I can imagine how hard it must have been, especially considering the history between you two. But Izuku, he paused, his eyes narrowing slightly, almost as if he were trying to read Izuku's thoughts. You can't let that define how you approach things in the future. You're a hero in training now. That means facing your emotions head-on and still being able to act with clarity when it counts. Yeah, I know. I'm trying, he said quietly. Hound Dog stood up and looked to Izuku. I know. It's all I ask. That's all you can do, and it takes time. But don't worry about that now. Go back to the bus. You are about to depart with your internship. Good luck with Edgeshot. You can learn a lot from a number 5 hero. Izuku nodded, trying to absorb Hound Dog's words as they sank in. He had heard similar things from other mentors, but coming from the calm, collected hero in front of him, it hit differently. His thoughts were still tangled, but there was something reassuring about Hound Dog's steady presence, as though everything would fall into place in time. I will. I'll make sure to learn as much as I can, Izuku said, feeling a new determination settling in him. Thank you, Hound Dog. I really appreciate the advice, he said, running out of the door. No problem, kid, he said, calling out to him. Izuku made it with record time, getting back to the dorms in less than 1 minute. He had a bit of help with Jolt. The bus was outside waiting for them, and many were getting on. Mr. Aizawa looked to Izuku, who was holding his hero costume, with Izuku smiling. Right on time, he said, getting on the bus. Izuku stepped onto the bus, scanning the rows of seats. Most of his classmates were already inside, chatting excitedly or checking their gear. Some, like Todoroki and Ida, sat quietly, mentally preparing for what was ahead. Others, like Kaminari and Kirishima, were buzzing with anticipation. He sat next to Jiro, who was listening to music. You ready, dude? We won't see each other for a week, she said, putting her headphones down for a minute. Yeah, I am. Just lots of emotions right now, he said, putting his hands to his face. Jiro smirked slightly, nudging him with her elbow. Yeah, I get that. First big internship, pressure's on. Yeah, I'm always like this. I get the jitters, then it fades out eventually when I'm used to it, he said, leaning back in his seat, breathing. "You ready to work with death arms?" he asked her. "I personally know it will be good for you. You'll learn how to fight more hand-to-hand in case you ever need to do that." Jiro stretched her arms and let out a small sigh. "Yeah, I know. I've been thinking about that too. I can't always rely on my sound waves alone. If someone gets too close, I need to be able to fight back properly." "You will be fine. You're tough," he said, looking at her. He looked at her and noticed she had a huge blush on her face. "You okay, Kyoka? Do you have a fever or something?" he said, putting a hand to her head. Jiro's blush deepened as Izuku's hand rested gently against her forehead. She immediately swatted his hand away, turning her head toward the window to avoid eye contact. "I'm fine, nerd. Just surprised, that's all." "Just making sure," he said as she offered him an earpiece. She was still blushing as she looked out the window. "You want to listen to music with me?" she asked. Izuku blinked in surprise at the offer, then gave a small smile as he took the earbud. "Yeah, sure. What are we listening to?" Jiro still refused to look at him directly, pretending to fiddle with the cord of her headphones. "It's just some rock. Thought it might help clear your head before the internship. Are you sure you are good? Your cheeks are red," he said, putting his hands to her cheeks once more. Jiro nearly jumped out of her seat when Izuku placed his hands on her cheeks again. She swatted them away for the second time, her face burning even more. "Would you stop that?" she hissed, turning to glare at him, though the effect was ruined by how flustered she looked. Izuku laughed awkwardly, rubbing the back of his head. Sorry. I just wanted to make sure you weren't getting sick before your internship." "I'm fine," she grumbled, crossing her arms and sinking a little into her seat. "Sorry if I made you mad, Kyoka. I didn't mean to," he said, feeling bad. Jiro glanced at him, noticing the way his expression dropped slightly. His usual energy seemed to dim, and she could tell that he genuinely felt bad about upsetting her. With a sigh, she shifted in her seat, turning toward him slightly. "You didn't make me mad," she muttered, tapping her fingers against her thigh. "I just wasn't expecting it." Izuku blinked. "Really?" Jiro rolled her eyes. "Yeah, really. You're such a dork sometimes." "Stay, Izuku," said Momo from behind them. "I don't mean to be a bother, but could you help me with the settings of the Formuband?" she asked, showing him the invention he made her. Izuku turned around, spotting Momo holding the Formuband in her hands. He had suggested it a while ago, and seeing her actually use it made him feel a surge of pride. "Oh, of course," Izuku said, shifting in his seat so he could get a better look. Jiro leaned back, subtly watching as he examined the device. Momo handed it over. "I was testing it last night, but I think the calibration might be slightly off. It's taking longer than expected to recognize the mass-to-energy ratio of my creations." Izuku nodded, already analyzing the issue in his head. "That makes sense. The sensors might not be adjusting to the variance in your quirk's output. Let me." He trailed off, pressing a few buttons on the side of the band, fine-tuning the input sensitivity. Jiro smirked, resting her chin in her palm. "And here goes full nerd mode." Izuku shot her a quick look before turning his attention back to the Formuband. "Okay, I think if we adjust the responsiveness here and tweak the processing delay." He tapped the screen, his expression lighting up as he found solution. "Try it now." Momo slipped it back on her wrist and activated her quirk. "Oh, that's much better." She smiled at him. "Thank you, Izuku. Your attention to detail is always so impressive." Izuku blushed at the compliment, rubbing the back of his head. "I just like figuring things out." The right was filled with chatter, even if it was a little after 5 in the morning. He looked over to his left to see Mineta glaring at him. He went wide-eyed when he made a gesture to come here. He took out the earpiece to make sure not to disturb Jiro as he scooted over to them. "What's up? Why are you glaring at me?" he whispered to him. "Because you're always with girls," he said, upset. Kaminari next to him leaned into the conversation. "He has a point, Izuku bro. You're a chick magnet." Izuku blinked, his face turning red. "What? No, I'm not," he whispered back, incredulous. He quickly glanced over at Jiro, who was still listening to her music, blissfully unaware of the conversation unfolding. Mineta pulled out a sticky note and cleared his throat, whispering to him. "These are the girls you talked to over the past 24 hours. Jiro, Setsuna, Shizuki, Ishido, Azui, Uraraka, Yanagi, Hagakure, and Pony. Izuku stared at the sticky note in disbelief. Wait a second. You've been keeping track of who I've been talking to. His voice was a mix of surprise and embarrassment. He glanced over at Jiro again, who was still completely oblivious to the conversation going on around her. Izuku couldn't believe what he was seeing. Was Mineta actually keeping a record of who he interacted with? Kaminari snickered. His expression was full of amusement. Mineta doesn't miss a thing, bro. It's his thing. He's got the whole chick magnet tracker system down. He's like a walking romance encyclopedia. Izuku groaned, burying his face in his hands. I'm not a chick magnet. I don't even know how I ended up talking to all of them. He glanced down at the note again, feeling the heat in his cheeks intensifying. Some of these are just casual conversations. Not like that. What are you guys whispering about? Asked Kirishima, looking over the set behind him as he was in front of them. Yeah, what is it? Asked Siro as the two of them were looking over the seat. Izuku's face turned even redder as he tried to explain himself. It's not what you think. Mineta's just, keeping track of who I talk to. He quickly glanced at the sticky note again, his heart racing. But it's not like that, okay? It's not a big deal. Mineta snickered and added, Oh, it's a big deal, all right. Izuku's got more girls on his radar than you'd think. I'm just helping him keep track, so he doesn't miss out. Kaminari chimed in with a smirk. Yeah, man. It's like you're in some kind of romantic spy game, and Mineta's your mission control. Izuku let out an exasperated sigh, his face still burning. Guys, come on, this is embarrassing. I'm just trying to focus on the internship, not some girl tracker thing. I don't know, bro, said Siro, whispering. Women tend to gravitate to you. I look at it in a way that Mineta is jealous, he said, chuckling as Mineta looked offended. No, SHD, I am jealous, he whispered, pointing at Izuku. Izuku shook his head in disbelief, trying to process the conversation that was rapidly escalating. Jealous? Mineta, this isn't about being jealous. It's just I don't even know how to explain it. I don't even know how all of this started. I'm going back to my seat, he said, turning around blushing. He put his earpiece back in and sighed, listening to her music to calm down. Jiro smirked at Izuku as she heard the whole conversation. She wouldn't tell him, but it was cute the way he acted sometimes. Soon all of Class 1A were all at the train station, ready to be sent off to where they needed to be sent off to. Mr. Aizawa had a few words to say for his class. All right, everyone. This week is going to be pretty important for all of you. Mr. Aizawa's eyes scanned the group of students before him. You've all been selected for internships with professional heroes. You've worked hard to get to this point, but remember, this isn't a vacation. You'll be expected to work just as hard as any pro, if not harder. The internship will test your skills, your decision-making, and your ability to handle real-world situations. Also, remember this, you are not pro heroes yet. You still need licenses. So, if something does get a bit iffy, listen to the pros. The class stood at attention as Mr. Aizawa's words settled in. The weight of his message was clear. This wasn't just some learning experience. It was a real-world test, and mistakes could have consequences. Izuku shifted uneasily, still feeling the heat in his cheeks from the earlier teasing, but the thought of the upcoming internship was quickly taking precedence in his mind. He couldn't afford to be distracted by jokes, no matter how persistent they were. Now, good luck. Do your best and learn a lot, said Aizawa as he looked to his students. Izuku smiled as he looked over to his friends. He walked over to the group of Jiro, Momo, Uraraka, and Kirishima. Good luck, you guys, he said, smiling at all of them. Ah, yeah, we will do our best, said Kirishima. Agreed. We will all come back better, said Momo happily. Izuku smiled as he continued to talk with his friends. He looked out of the corner of his eyes to see Ida walking away. He turned around and ran over to him. Achiko looked to see Izuku running, and she did the same. Ida, wait, called out Izuku. Ida stopped in his tracks when he heard Izuku calling his name. He turned around, a strained expression on his face, his usual stern demeanor replaced by something more somber. What is it, Yagi? Ida's voice was quieter than usual, with a hint of frustration. His hands were clenched at his sides, as if he were holding something back. Izuku approached him, his smile fading slightly as he noticed the change in Ida's posture. "Ida, I just wanted to wish you good luck on your internship. I know you'll do great. You've worked so hard for this." "Thanks, Yagi. But there's something I need to focus on during this internship. It's not just about the work," Ida said, his gaze briefly turning away as though he was lost in thought. "I have other things to keep in mind." Izuku blinked, sensing the weight in Ida's voice, but unsure how to respond. "Other things? Like what?" Before Ida could respond, Uraraka caught up with them, slightly out of breath from running behind Izuku. "Hey, Ida, we're all in this together, okay? If there's anything you need to talk about, we've got your back," she said, her voice filled with concern. Ida didn't immediately answer. Instead, he looked down, clenching his jaw. His usual confident and reassuring aura seemed to be slipping, replaced by something far more conflicted. "I appreciate it, but there are things I have to deal with on my own. Just focus on doing your best, okay?" "Ida," Izuku started, his voice hesitant. "If you ever need to talk, or if there's anything we can do, don't hesitate to reach out." Ida straightened up at that, forcing a small smile. "Thank you, Izuku. I will, but for now, I have to focus." His expression hardened once more, and he turned to walk away, his steps quick and purposeful. Izuku wished that he had done something more to help his friend that day, to be there for him, to help him. Izuku got off at his stop, saying goodbye to his friends a while ago. He opened his phone to see he had a text from a group chat that he was put into from his dad. It has his parents and 2 siblings. "Dad, good luck with your internships, everyone. Proud you all. Mom, love you, my babies. Kick butt. Enori, thanks guys. Ichiro, Tai Izuku." Thank you, it wouldn't hurt to reply. It didn't hurt. But he put it away for now and walked out of the train station to be greeted by a chauffeur holding a whiteboard with his name on it. "Izuku Yagi," said the man opening the door in the car. "I am here to escort you to the Edgeshot agency." Izuku nodded, his nerves still tingling from the earlier exchange with Ida. Something was clearly bothering his friend, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. He took a deep breath, shaking off his concerns for the moment. He had a job to do now, and he couldn't afford to get distracted. This was his first internship, and he had to make a good impression. He climbed into the back of the car, and the chauffeur shut the door behind him. The inside of the vehicle was plush, the leather seats inviting and comfortable. The soft hum of the engine settled in as they began driving toward the Edgeshot agency, and Izuku stared out the window, watching the city pass by. His mind was buzzing with excitement, anticipation, and a little bit of anxiety. Edgeshot was one of the top heroes in the country, known for his incredible speed and ability to transform into a human projectile. He had a reputation for being extremely meticulous and professional, which made Izuku both excited and nervous. He had no idea what to expect. What if he wasn't good enough? What if he made a mistake? The car came to a stop outside a sleek, modern building, the headquarters of the Edgeshot agency. The exterior was a sharp contrast to the older, more traditional buildings around it, its polished glass and metal structure gleaming in the sunlight. Izuku's heart started a race as he stepped out of the car. This was the real deal. He was about to enter the world of professional heroes. "Thank you," Izuku said to the chauffeur as he stepped out of the car and adjusted his bag on his shoulder. The man gave a polite nod before driving off. Izuku took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and walked toward the entrance. He wasn't sure what awaited him, but he was determined to give it his all. As he approached the door, it slid open automatically, and he was greeted by a tall man with sharp, angular features and a stern expression. "Izuku Yagi," the man asked, his voice low but steady. "You're here for your internship with Edgeshot?" "Yes," Izuku replied, nodding. "I'm here for the internship." The man sized him up for a moment before nodding and gesturing for Izuku to follow him. "This way." Izuku followed the man down the hallway, his footsteps echoing in the quiet building. He couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This was its first real step into the world of professional heroes. He had worked so hard to get here, and now the time had come to prove himself. The man led him into a spacious room with high ceilings, sleek modern furniture, and a large glass window that offered a panoramic view of the city. The room had a serious, non-nonsense vibe, and Izuku immediately felt the intensity of the environment. Many people were at desks, likely looking for crimes to report on, some with statistic boards, radars, and radios. He counted nearly 30 people. "Follow the carpet until you get to the double doors at the end. They are waiting for you," said the man, leaning against the door now. As he reached the double doors, he hesitated for just a moment. He pushed the doors open to be greeted with a big desk and with windows providing a nice view of the city. In the center was Edgeshot looking out of the window. Gran Torino was off to the side of the desk as Izuku walked in, and he nodded at him. Edgeshot turned around, and Izuku could see a smile under his mask. "Ah, welcome, Izuku Yagi," he said, walking over to him. "It is a pleasure to meet you." Izuku clutched his suitcase handle in his right hand as he switched the suitcase to his left. He stuck out his right hand to greet him with a handshake. Edgeshot's grip was firm and steady as he shook Izuku's hand. Despite the mask that covered most of his face, there was warmth in his voice that made Izuku feel more at ease. "It's an honor to be here, sir," Izuku said, trying to keep his voice steady. His nerves still buzzed in his chest, but he was determined to make a good impression. This was his chance to prove himself, and he wasn't about to squander it. Edgeshot's eyes seemed to glint behind his mask, his smile more apparent now. "I've heard and seen good things about you, Yagi. You've made quite a name for yourself already." He stepped back, motioning to the room. "Please have a seat. Let's get down to business." Izuku nodded, taking a deep breath as he moved toward the chair in front of the desk. As he sat down, he couldn't help but glance around the room. The atmosphere was so different from what he was used to back at UA. The polished desk, the sleek technology around them, and the serious tone of everything reminded him that this wasn't a training ground anymore. This was the real deal. Gran Torino, who had been quietly observing the exchange, gave Izuku a small nod of acknowledgement. The seasoned hero's presence added to the weight of the moment. Despite his usually laid-back demeanor, he walked over with Izuku and sat down next to Edgeshot, pulling a chair up from the background to get closer. "Right," Edgeshot continued, turning his attention back to Izuku. "Would you like some tea?" he offered, pouring himself some. Izuku nodded slowly as he poured himself and Izuku some tea. Gran Torino settled into his chair beside Edgeshot, his usual laid-back posture making the atmosphere seem slightly less intense. He gave Izuku a small, approving smile as Edgeshot poured the tea, the steam rising gently from the cups. "Tea always helps to calm the nerves," Gran Torino said, his voice light but still carrying an air of experience. "You've got quite a big day ahead of you. You might as well take the edge off." Edgeshot looked at Izuku with curious eyes and sat up straighter. "Now, then, I should tell you now that you're the only one that I offered an internship to out of everyone at the sports festival. The first in a few years." Izuku's eyes widened slightly at the revelation. The only one. He couldn't help but feel a sense of both pride and pressure settling over him. Being the sole person chosen was a huge honor, but it also meant that he had to live up to some very high expectations. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves. "Thank you, sir," Izuku said, bowing slightly. Edgeshot put his hands up in a placating manner. "No need for thanks, kid. That was all on you. But do you know why I chose you?" Izuku tried to think of an answer, but he couldn't think of one off the top of his head right now. Edgeshot saw he was hesitating and decided to answer for him. "When I was watching you in the one-on-one battles, I didn't take an interest in you immediately. The first round against that Shinso boy, I didn't think much of it, but it was quite clever that you found a way around his quirk. The second round, when you fought your sister Enori, now that was where I started to be interested in you. You were pitted against an incredible, strong telekinesis quirk, and you found a way around it. The third round, you showed your durability and strength against your brother by showing that you were a brick wall. The final match against Bakugo showed to me that you were there to show everyone that you weren't going to give in and give up. The reason I chose you was because of 4 things: determination, heart, intelligence, adaptability." Izuku listened intently, his heart pounding as Edgeshot laid out the reasons behind his choice. He hadn't expected such an in-depth breakdown of his actions. Hearing it all laid out like that, He could feel the weight of the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. Gran Torino, who had been sipping his tea, nodded approvingly. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a fight and lose sight of strategy. But you, kid, you saw what mattered. That's what makes the difference. I never realized I was showing all of that, Izuku said, his voice soft but filled with a sense of gratitude. I just wanted to do my best to keep up. I still have a lot to learn, but I'll keep working hard. I won't let you down. Edgeshot smiled, a small but genuine smile. That's the attitude I like to see. Hard work, resilience, and a willingness to learn. Those are the traits that separate the good from the great. But remember, this isn't just about proving yourself to us. It's about proving yourself to you. Heroes don't just fight for recognition. They fight because they believe it's the right thing to do. Though in question, if I may, what type of hero do you want to be? Izuku smiled at the question. I want to be a hero that falls into many categories. Combat, rescue, and support. I want to be as well-rounded as possible, he said with conviction. Edgeshot leaned forward, his eyes studying Izuku with an intense focus. Well-rounded, huh? He repeated, as if tasting the words. That's ambitious. There are a few heroes like that. Myself, All Might, and a few others. I will do my best to help you get there, Izuku Yagi. Thank you, sir, said Izuku. Well then, how about you go and get changed into your hero costume, and we will go from there, Edgeshot said happily. Right, Izuku said, his voice full of determination as he stood up from his chair. He gave a quick, respectful bow to Edgeshot and Gran Torino before heading to the back of the room where the changing area was located. His heart was pounding in his chest as he made his way to the small, private space. He set down his bag and opened it, pulling out the neatly folded hero costume his mother had helped him design. He pulled out a note from May, and he sighed. Oh boy, he said, flipping it open. The support course department has made some changes to your suit, mainly your gloves. White looks better than gray on your costume. That's the only thing I changed. Handsome. Izuku gave a deadpan look as he started putting on his forest green jumpsuit. He put on his white gloves and black boots, and May even gave him this weird thing that connected around his neck. It was likely for style more than anything, but he looked good regardless. He looked himself over one last time, taking in the full outfit. This was it. His first day on an internship with Edgeshot, of all people. He was both nervous and exhilarated. His heart raced, and the weight of Edgeshot's words echoed in his mind. Determination. Heart. Intelligence. Adaptability. He was determined to live up to those expectations, but a small voice in the back of his mind reminded him of how much he still had to learn. All right, Izuku, he muttered to himself, straightening his posture. You've got this. He gave himself a final nod of encouragement before stepping out of the changing area and making his way back to where Edgeshot and Gran Torino were waiting. When Izuku re-entered the main room, Edgeshot gave him a brief glance up and down, a small, approving nod on his face. Gran Torino, meanwhile, gave a thumbs up with a wry smile. Looking sharp, kid, Gran Torino commented. I'd say you're ready to take on the world. Izuku blushed slightly but nodded. Thank you, Gran Torino. His eyes shifted to Edgeshot. I'm ready, sir. Edgeshot rose from his chair, his movements quick and precise. Good. Let's not waste any more time. We've got work to do. He turned toward the door, and Izuku followed closely behind, feeling a surge of excitement running through him. Time to start this internship. Thank you for joining us on this journey through What If Deku Gained Power to Create Quirk. We hope you found it as captivating as we did. A big thank you to the Ultimate One for creating such an engaging story. Don't forget to visit their profile on fanfiction.net for more fantastic works. The link is in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe to Zenin Fanfics for more intriguing explorations into fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we love hearing your thoughts and suggestions in the comments section. See you soon in the next video.